And it looks like we're live. It is time for some midweek geek, and I have beside me a familiar panel. Hello to Saxius. I see. I'm the only one who hasn't put my real name in here. You can now see that.
Everyone else seems to have been doing it, so I figured I might as well actually participate in that.
I mean, you all know I'm a John anyway. No, short for Jonathan. So Saxius brackets Oscar. We have Eli brackets Elfbait.
Hello.
And Sean brackets Mage's Musings. So will I be John brackets the old geek, or shall I be the old geek brackets John?
You should just be John Yog.
John Yog.
There you go. There's a great last name, Yog.
Yog, yes. Did you see in the video yesterday? I discovered module R8 was called a Yog's Dessert.
Yeah, that was
Did
fun.
see that? Yes.
I hadn't really known about that module. I don't think it's ever been printed beyond being used at a convention, but I'll have to see if I can find.
That was a good video. I didn't even know some of those modules existed.
I went. That was, I believe, every official first edition adventure.
Yeah,
there were a couple from sort of 88, 89, 90, which were first and second edition compatible, such as WG8 Fate of Istus, but it was badged with second edition, so there were a few, and of course they were compatible with each other anyway. But anyhow, I just thought I'd do pretty much the lot. Anyway,
so it begins.
And so it begins. Here we go, Hungar. How are you, Hungar? Are you out? Are you out of that infernal hospital, or have you got yourself an attractive nurse? And are you comfortable there? That's what we want to know. Because I know last time you were in hospital, but not too unhappy because the nurse had caught your eye. But first, no, I'm here. Where's here? Is here home or here hospital?
I'm gonna go with home.
No, he's in the hospital. I watched his stream earlier today.
Oh, right. Okay.
He's also lost his beard.
Oh, damn.
Completely.
Yeah, it's gone. He's got a nifty new hat, but no beard.
No beard at all.
Both of the brothers, James and Hungar.
But he's got his hot nurse, so okay. Look, there's always every cloud has a silver lining, and your silver lining is your nurse.
And last I saw him on stream, he also had a nice cup of pudding. It looked like so.
All right, good. That's not a problem.
Hungar and I learned the other day that we're only like 2 months apart.
Oh yeah. Is that how long it would take to walk between your two houses?
No, in age.
I'm joking.
Well, you never know. No, he's in Florida, so yeah, no, not quite. But
no, well, it would take a fair distance to walk from Toronto to Florida, though, wouldn't it?
Well, maybe 2 months. I don't know.
Maybe 2 months. Yes.
Three-day drive. So I don't know.
Yeah. Anyhow. Let's keep this a bit shorter than usual. But any gaming we've done in the last week? Shadow of the Demon Lord, of course, last Thursday. Highlight of it: Gingerbeard on being told that the air was toxic. He says, "Okay, then I'm going to stop breathing."
Pretty much.
Goblin logic, and he passed out unconscious as a result.
Did you lick the air and claim it?
No, I did not. No.
You should have licked his corpse or his unconscious body.
I got round it by picking. I farmed the earwax from my ears and shoved it up my nose, and there wasn't quite enough, so I farmed some of the other characters' earwax from their ears as well and shoved it up my nose.
Gross.
Yummy.
Yeah.
But there were some good moments as always. And then on Saturday, it was part one of the second adventure in Reign of Terror, the 1794 adventure, which involved reanimated victims of the guillotine with heads reattached but the head's not necessarily belonging to the original
Correct
body.
body.
Yes, and being attached sideways and backwards rather than forwards. So when one of the characters pulled the hood off this strange hooded figure from behind, he saw straight into the rotting, vacant eyes of a middle-aged man on top of a young woman's body.
Sounds like a very Sam Raimi episode.
But and the head belonged to the father of another character's love interest as well. So that it was all right. It was all right. They went off track a bit as always. And then Monday we played Odyssey of the Dragon Lords, and we had a completely fight-free session, which was a bit of a relief for a 5th edition game, which has been throwing too many fights at us. It was a role-playing session and a drinking session and a carousing session, and it was quite good fun. Anyway, Saxius.
Yes. Well, Shadow of the Demon Lords, as you said, great deal of fun. You're now in, well, named levels, so you have taken on more serious jobs. You have been given the simple task of the miners uncovered a beating stone heart in one of the coal mines. We must retrieve this and find out what it is. And you, the lot, have been given a clockwork or a bronze golem that will be coming with you that has the mind of a child. And you have convinced it by its introduction that its name is Awakened, and it is its friend, and it is your friends, and you are its friends. After various forms of tomfoolery of you realizing that you never collected the payment of the demon worshipping cult that previously hired you, you went back, saw the aftermath of whatever it was that you did, and went, the pot is still ours because we licked it, and that was, this entire lot, I don't know how many dozens of people died over a pot that John licked. This is the peak storytelling that is Shadow of the Demon Lord, my dear friends.
We didn't care that it got all their blown up bits of body all over it and
flavoring,
and all that
coloring.
Yeah.
So that was done. You actually went on to do the actual quest. You met some goblins that had been hired by someone else. You convinced them that they were idiots and needed to go back to where they came from, which is the barn, and get jobs, actual jobs. I don't know who started it, but someone convinced everyone to go to the top of one of the hills so that you can climb onto each other's shoulders. Oh, that was you, of course. So you convinced everyone to climb onto a hill where we then had to, you had to be on the bronze golem's shoulder. Then the bronze golem had to climb onto itself, onto you.
Oh, yeah. Because that would make us taller. Because I'm on the bronze golem's shoulder, and then if he gets, then it gets on my shoulders again. It's there twice.
I'm just going to step out of character here. DMing for this lot is a challenge in itself, and I really get to test my improv skills. So that happened. It all fell apart, and you fell down the hill, took a bunch of damage.
Yeah, we managed to nearly kill ourselves without actually fighting anything. We just all sort of fell down the hill and got squished by the golem on the way down. That's our friend.
I'm going to just cut it shorter. You eventually got inside where I wanted you to go. You discovered that there were bodies everywhere, absolutely mutilated. You found out that there are flesh golems in here, and they look really tough. So we're going to take all the cadavers outside, put it onto your bronze golem friend, and now all the goblins are underneath all the body parts, just making them move so that it can look like another flesh golem was walking through, because disguises.
Yeah.
So that, I think Grumpy Old Slan has got the perfect explanation of our entire game. Goblins have logic that logic ignores. Exactly.
Yes.
That summarizes the Shadow of the Demon Lord campaign here. Whatever things I think of, the group will just universally just go like, well, goblin logic dictates, and whatever the most innate and insane idea comes forward is what is now a reasonable explanation.
Of course it is.
Yeah, trying to prepare for that every week is a monumental task.
I'm glad we're making you earn your stripes.
I really feel like I've earned my stripes with you lot. It's just like I don't know. Anyway, my Saturday second edition group, they entered negotiations with a clan of were-rats, which one of the players kept on referring to as Skaven for obvious reasons, and the players are level 9 and 10. The were-rats are not idiots. They recognize that the players are very powerful. And they basically went, okay, hi, white flag, let's please not kill each other here or try to do anything stupid. Negotiations was had throughout the majority of the game. And we came to a very good, reasonable conclusion where everyone shook hands. And then the players who are wizards and thieves basically went, right, that's good, we'll stand up and we'll leave the room. And everyone sort of left the room except for the dwarf, who plays a socially awkward or socially inept character, who decided that it is now my turn to speak. And he started out by saying like, oh, well, now that you've made terms with the other guys, it's now my terms. And I'd like to start out by saying I want to be very good friends, because friends are like rats. You don't know where they are. And it's just like he started off on the worst foot to begin with. And he kept on talking, and it got worse and worse. And I began rolling reaction rolls, and the relationships just went straight down the hill. And he ended off the entire thing by saying, oh, I give them a hug and I clap their cheek. Yes, that was the exact wording. And he said that intentionally. And I rolled for it, and it was not the good cheek. It was not the good cheek that he clapped. Ergo, he almost broke down the entire agreement that was made. And the other players, upon hearing the screeching shrill and screeches of the were-rats basically shouting for him to be murdered, ran back into the room to find him basically being straddled down with them ready to just claw at his face. And they had to apologize, drag that character out, while the were-rat leader shouted at them that he's banished from the dwarven player is banished from the underground tunnels, and he's never allowed in there again. And if it wasn't because of the other players, their deal would be off. So we've now had to actually make a list of all the areas that this character has been banned from, and we're reaching up towards. No, what are we having here? Yes, yes, James.
Oh, I didn't mean to put that on yet. Eternal
screen.
I didn't mean to put that on. Let me just go back. Come on.
Yeah, DM James has got it right. Yeah.
Turning the other Skaven cheek.
Yes, he has. That's the bit I was trying to click on, but it made me put my other screen on. Why is it doing that?
Do you have your screen select activated?
I appear to be lagging a little bit. Right, I'll do it again in a bit.
All right.
No, it's up now.
It's up now.
It's there.
Is
we
it?
can see DMG. Yeah, we can see James's comment.
Right, okay.
I think your lag may have made you click on your screen share. So
Looks like it. Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, those have been my games. It's been a lot of fun, and
Good.
very much enjoyed it. And and I've got homework between now and next Saturday, because I need to outline all 14 NPCs for the thief character, and I need to finalize answers in regards for the exact economical setup of the city that they live in and what areas of exploitation that they can go for. I brought this upon myself, but I'm about 70% done before they even asked. Just need to finalize it.
Slan, can you translate that? Tom, does this mean we fall in the... I don't know what l'abîme means. I think tombong is fall, but I might be completely wrong.
We are falling into the abyss.
We're falling. Right. Abîme, abyss. Right. That makes sense. That makes sense. Any games? Eli Brackett's Elfbait?
Not a lot, actually. Monday's game almost happened. Actually got some miniatures gaming done earlier in the day, which is cool, and also met some local gamers in the area I've moved to, so that was cool. And then came home, got myself all prepped for my game, and down to the wire had 3 of my 5 players call out due to illness, and so couldn't play. And then tonight I was supposed to go play in my brother's game, but his kid's sick, and I don't want to bring that back to my wife. So I won't be gaming.
No. And Sean, or Majors Musings Brackets, Sean.
Yes, I'm changing it up just to keep you guys on your toes. None of my regular games played, but I did sit in on a one-shot of a game called Lex Arcana last night. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's a role-playing game set. The idea is the Roman Empire didn't fall, so you're set in roughly 600 BC, and you play Custodes Arcanus, basically a cohort of Roman soldiers who investigate the paranormal. And so you're sent over the Empire.
You mean 600 AD if it didn't fall? Because the Empire was...
Isn't that what I said? Did I say
BC?
Oh, okay, 80. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know why I said that, but yeah, 80. Yes. But yeah, you play the Roman soldiers. So it's set on Earth, but alternate timeline kind of thing, and you're investigating supernatural threats. It was interesting. I mean, kind of a neat setting. The dice mechanic threw us off first. The DM was running it for the first time, so he wasn't fully familiar with it. But so the idea is if you have
a few hiccups when there's a new game system,
If you have a skill of say 16, the idea is you can choose what dice you want to use, so long as the maximum value of each dice is equal to the number. So 16, you might choose a D10 and a D6, if that makes sense, and then you roll the 2 dice together to achieve your target number. And I was like, okay, so I had an 18 because I had a 16 fight skill plus 2 with swords, so I had 18, and I'm like, and it uses the exploding dice mechanic. So if you roll the maximum number on your die, you can keep re-rolling. And my mind immediately, well, why wouldn't I just always use D2s, right? So I asked the DM, can I use D2s? And I said, yeah. So I rolled 9 D2, and then half of them just kept getting 2s. And it just kept escalating. It's okay, that's a little ridiculous. And then we looked it up, and turned out you can only have a maximum of 3 dice, but you can use any denomination so long as it's equal to your skill. So that fixed that problem. But I was like, that's going to be broken. You just use D2s. But it was interesting. It was kind of fun. Yeah, it's an interesting mechanic. With that limitation, it's great. So it's like with my 18, I decided, okay, I'm going to use 2 D4s and a D10, right? Yeah. But I could have used 3 D6 if I wanted, or a D12 and a D6, or whatever. So you get the choice of what dice complement you use when you make the roll.
Yep.
So, but yeah, fun setting, fun game. I wouldn't buy the books or dive into it. I'm already sort of married to my my D&D, but you're going to run a historical setting.
I like the sound of the setting. I do. Like
the
sound of that setting.
Yeah. So it's really good if you're heavily into Roman history and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Right, now with 19 people in chat, it'd be a good time to mention next week is my channel's 2-year anniversary. And on the Friday next week, I won't be doing the usual. That's the plan at the moment, is not to do the usual Fighting Fantasy stream. Instead, we're planning on playing Drinking Quest, which means we're going to play a card game live online on the Friday night stream. And I'm going to be one of the players, and Sean will be our our compare,
Designated DM.
a designated DM. But at the moment, we are still looking for 3 other players to join in. So if you, anyone in chat, if you would like to take part in a game of Drinking Quest a week on Friday, this is what you need. You will need to be willing to be on camera. You will need to be willing to be potentially laughed at and derided live on the internet. That's not a problem. You need to be willing to take part in the whole stream, which should be about 2.5 hours. Starts at 9:30 GMT, which is typically about 4:30, 3:30 US times. And you will need to be willing to have a beer handy, or at least 5 or 6 beers handy.
4 at minimum, yeah.
4 minimum. If you're interested, let me know. Join the Discord. There's no link in this stream yet, but there is a link in all the previous streams. And let me know in there. And we are planning on having a little bit of a get together beforehand to go through the rules of the game to make sure it runs quite smoothly. But yes, we're going to have a bit of drunken shenanigans, a bit of a party on stream, and hopefully chat will be there to take the mickey out of us as we burp and giggle. And
Squirrel Hermit says he can make it if he can. He's in if he can make it.
Yeah, more than welcome, Squirrel. If you'd like to take part, you're more than welcome.
When would you know that if you can make it?
Yeah, that's key. That's key. So yeah, if you can let us know as soon as possible, that would be great.
So we don't want to derail Geeks Friday. Like if we know we can't do this, and he can just do his fighting fantasy as normal.
I mean, it is a bit of a experiment, isn't it? Bit of experiment. But
I'm going to show up with a drink. It won't be beer. It will be a spirit instead. So
spirits are fine. As long as you have the drink you can chug, right? Or slag back or whatever. Like when I've played in the past, I was telling John, we played hardcore. I went through 2/3 of a bottle of whiskey. I felt it the next day. We won't be going that hardcore. We will not go that hardcore. But
we won't be playing the hardcore mode. We're playing the introductory mode.
Fair enough. I'll have something and then I'll see if I can get something else for that. Cool.
But yeah, like if you had rum, you have your rum and cokes. Just have rum and cokes ready to go.
I'll have a beer and decide if I need to chuck anything.
Yes. I plan to get 6 to 8 cans of a fairly weak but smooth beer. One I can drink fairly easily. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. But I do need to say hello to everyone in chat because I haven't done that yet, and I feel bad for that. So we have Echo, we have Halakar, we have Hungar, and there's me, and Slan's here, and General Nuts here. And DM James is around, and Gene from Inksplat Records is about. And who else have we got in chat? Sausage Toes, yes. Kabuki Kid, Squirrel Hermit, and here's Brian James, and the Crafting Game has joined us as well. There's 24 in chat. Right, tonight's topic is dungeon design, and I made a little bit of a boo-boo in sharing my screen a bit too soon. I'm just going to switch the screen layout, and I'm going to switch to present something. And I'm hoping that you will see a map.
Spinning wheel.
It's just, loading at the moment.
Eternal screen.
And the abyss, thank you. Welcome, darkness, my old friends.
Has the map not yet appeared?
No.
No, just the never-ending screen.
Stupid. Oh,
you are sharing. You're currently only sharing your %.
Yeah, I'm
your tabs, though.
What I would say.
Is it a tab? Is it a
it's
window?
Not a tab. No.
Is it a window?
No. It is a window. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So where you've got % at the very bottom, you click on that, then you click share screen.
Yeah.
And then it will give you an entire screen, and next to that, it will then say window, and then from there you should have some options.
It didn't.
Let's start by.
Well, I have done this before. Share screen, and I've got select window or screen, And it has now appeared. I only
There you
had
go.
entire screen and StreamYard before,
All
and
right,
now
that's
I've got
good.
my map. It's just
That's because
taken a bit
you've-
of time to come in.
That's because you were already showing the entire lot. So just select the map, click that,
Yeah.
and then click share.
Yeah, I've got it.
There we
It just
are.
hadn't. The third option hadn't appeared before.
There we are.
Hey.
So I tried to share the entire screen.
Anyway, tell us about this dungeon, please.
Right, I'm going to show you a sequence of dungeons that I've picked out because some of them are very, very good and some of them are very, very bad. And they've all come out of official TSR modules. Initially, panel, chat, some of you will know which module this is. I want to know whether you think this one is very, very good or very, very bad and why. And if you know which module it is, do say.
Oh.
I'm gonna go straight ahead and say I don't know what the module is.
Yeah, I didn't
Okay.
run modules much, so
Alright, so the entrance is at the bottom. You've got the road. You've got the main room that you enter into at area number 1. Then you've got the stairs
Yep.
going up towards the tower. You've got
Yep.
1, 2 main entrances, 3 entrances potentially. All right,
Yep.
so you're giving the players options from the very get-go. Likelihood of
Yep.
choosing the center one is quite high, meaning you're going straight into where the Great Hall is located.
I like it. I think it's a
It's-
useful map.
It's getting you in there. You've got various things, anywhere from sneaking around, even the smaller ones. Like if you look at room 16, 12, and 14 and 13, you can see that there are even like breakups within the very same hallway.
Yeah.
The fire pit, I keep on thinking this is like the great halls of the fire giants, but I know it's not that. Because these squares, like if they're meant to be 5 foot each,
They're 10
10
foot. They're
feet.
10 foot.
Default AD&D maps is 10 foot.
10
Yeah.
foot.
then, then yeah, okay, then 10 feet. That's massive. 20 feet across.
Mhm.
But only
Like-
10-foot hallways.
Yeah.
only 10-foot hallways. Jeez.
Well, that's the default in D&D, though, is 10-foot hallways. 10 feet isn't as big as it sounds when you,
If I
you
did-
say
I will-
10 feet.
Well,
I will tell you that.
Single file for a giant.
Yeah, single file for
A-
gun.
area
I don't
22
mind.
Area
Go on.
22 is open to the air,
Okay.
and those
Go on.
and those areas behind it to the right, 23, 24, 25, are like stabling sort of stuff and barracks sort of stuff.
Right.
So, has anyone in chat said they know which one it is?
Yeah, they're indicating that it's the hill setting of the hill giant.
Yes. This is the steading of the top level of the steading of the hill giant chief. Area 11, there is a massive party going on, which if you go in by the front door, and it's perfectly safe to because the guards are asleep and drunk, but you don't know that beforehand. You will hear a massive party going on in 11, but it is possible to go straight from the entrance straight into a room where there's a mass of enemies, and that's where the module can immediately head southwards. But the idea is that you creep around the edge, you don't alert them to your presence, and I think it's a great dungeon. I think it's because of the way it's designed with multiple entrances, and especially you've got wolves patrolling number 22. You've got the wolf keeper, who is a big rough hill giant in area. I think he's in area 19 or 20 to start with, somewhere up there. There are multiple routes down to the level below. Multiple routes in. So it's a dungeon layout that gives you masses of freedom to move around. So that is the steading of the hill giant chief. That is a great layout. Next one.
This is Elwyn's Sanctuary.
Well spotted. Good or bad?
Playable,
What,
but certainly not pretty.
The module or the map or the layout? Because that layout is
It's just a spiral. It's a
Yeah,
bit of a
yeah.
pain in the ass. Yeah.
that's that you. Christ.
No,
Hey,
it's,
if
like
you want to do a munchin game, this looks ideal because it's very much go from set to set to set to set.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you're more free roaming,
well, here's the other fun thing. I was about to highlight with my arrow, but you're not seeing that. But area 16 there's a dragon in that little corner there, in that little nook.
what age?
I think it's a young one. It's a black dragon chained into the corner.
Still, it's
Young one, you said.
Yes. This is one of the adventures in Castle Caldwell and beyond.
Castle
And
Caldwell,
I think this is one of the worst dungeon layouts I've encountered in a TSR product because it is utterly linear.
I've run
It's
it a few
linear.
times. Yeah, it's linear, and it does skew on the tedious side.
And it makes no sense.
It makes no sense. And even from a perspective of a stronghold, it's like I wouldn't want a stronghold like that. You know, I gotta go around the loop every time to get in and out.
Yep.
I can see this being actually a great selling point if it was something to do with like someone was utterly insane and built this. Like, give this to a tinkering gnome who've just gone like, I need this built, and he then enslaved like entire swaths of like orcs and hobgoblins to build this for him, and then bam, you know, like this is built, but it's clearly made by someone who's unhinged and deranged and has got who has abandoned reason and logic. Like that is a great selling point of why you've got this. Why is a dragon down here? Don't ask questions. It's the gnomes.
Well, that speaks to, I mean, a good point in that, you know, anything can be justified. No matter how bonkers it is, you can justify it with a context. And that can be half the fun of presenting a dungeon. Now, this module, I'm not a fan of the map. I kind of share John's chagrin for it. But I do like the overall module, the B9, for little drop-in adventures like this. And it's one of those ones that looks like crud, but it plays surprisingly well. Especially if you have a team that's capable of doing it, because you've got the escalating challenges culminating in A, that dragon, then B, a bunch of gargoyles and shadows. So you need a team that's capable of running this gauntlet. But it can be enjoyable. Every time I've run it, my players have loved it. It's just one of those things.
Fair enough. But I think as a dungeon layout, because I know El's commenting here without context, we're just looking at them at assessing the layout and what the layouts offer, because obviously a dungeon lives or dies by what you eventually put in it and what you make of it. But you've got to start with a decent framework like that steading of the hill giants. You could drop that to 5 foot squares and put other creatures in there and still create a very, very believable lair. And the layout gives you freedom.
Yeah,
Right.
It could easily be a barbarian chief's, longhouse.
Yeah.
Exactly. Even at 10
exactly.
feet, probably still, and still makes sense. Just be very spacious.
Yes. Right. Next one. I've got about 7 of these. So next one.
Automatically, I like that because the oblique angles. I'm a fan of that. So
I have blocked out the name of it. That black square at the top is me blocking out the name of it.
Oh, this looks familiar. I've seen it, but I can't place it.
Can't place it either.
That is like a fort. That's a fort at the very least. You've got the stables. You've got the murder holes along where you can see K8, K7, or 15.
Like the stairway up to the main gate.
There's definitely a logic to it, right? Like
that's appealing. The verisimilitude is baked into the map.
Look at the area A where you've got the stairs coming up. That is a wonderful murder area. God, you will see so many people dying there. Those steps will be sleek with blood. Like you're going to be struggling getting up.
It looks like there's a balcony up above on the upper level. If you look at that second level of the map up there.
God, yeah. That's nice. I like it. Like for a layout, this is the sort of thing I would plop down. But like, okay, you guys want to do a heist? Well, here's the king's castle. You guys want to actually do this thing? Well, here's the lord's, estate where you're at. This is the sort of thing.
M&E, those internal. That's an open courtyard area as well.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure. This must be like an undercroft here with all the pillars in the lower left.
Yes,
because otherwise it's just a room full of pillars. And at that point we're into Gygax territory. Here's a room with some stuff because.
Don't ask me to make sense of it. It doesn't have to make sense. Just adventure in it.
Exactly. But no, as an undercroft, it would make perfect sense.
Which one is this one from, John?
That is the Evil Abbey from X4, Master of the Desert Nomads.
That's why it looks familiar.
And that
picked it up, but I haven't read it.
It's filled with sort of lycanthropic-ish monks that turn into these mad undead at night. By day, it looks like a simple monastery. You've got the stables up in the northwest. You've got different lodgings areas. Those two various blocks are different outhouses, not outhouses, the guest houses and what have you. But that bit down the bottom left is the temple area where they're worshipping their evil deity. But that plays beautifully. It plays really, really well.
You could
freedom.
lift this and turn it into a monastery or an abbey anywhere.
Yes.
And I definitely would.
But I mean, that's one of my favorite dungeons. The module itself is quite linear, but that section is brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. Next one.
Speaking of Gygaxian architecture,
somebody made this using the random dungeon generator.
Yeah, didn't they just? And this is in an official module.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I love the random dungeon generator.
I'm gonna go straight out and say no, because I am going to struggle with some of these things, like the sudden curveness, the way some of the shapes are at. Like if you go to A8 on the right hand side, you go just a little bit up, that area right there, like I can see players just being like, well, why is this here? And then they will get out things like either oil, butter, or things like that, and just squeeze their way through, only to come to that very end. And I can see players just looking at me as the DM and go, why? Just why? Why have you put this there for us to go through all this pain with no form of reward? This was straight up a dead end. Like what?
Look how linear the encounter areas are.
Yes.
All of the other routes are just dead ends. There's only one way through it.
There's definitely no jaquazing this dungeon.
No. That is from A3, Assault on the Area of the Slave Lords, and that is
right there on the top.
Yeah, that is one of the reasons why I think it's one of the worst modules that TSR did.
And it was a tournament module too, so
yeah, it was,
I mean, there sort of had to be a bit of a linear push, but
they tended to be kind of board gamey in a lot of ways.
But it's just sort of random passage. It feels just like random passages.
Joe the lawyer. That's a dumb dungeon. Exactly.
It is.
Let's just cut to the chase. I mean, very, very succinct there.
Yeah, it is. It's a dreadful dungeon. It's not a good module. Next one. This is only a bit of the dungeon.
Is that a dungeon or?
It's a hex crawl dungeon.
Yeah.
I guess.
Are we in caves? Are we on ground?
Or are we in caves, or is that just a path through the forest? It doesn't.
It's underground. This is underground.
All right.
I could definitely see lifting that to be like the path through a dense jungle.
Yeah, literally that's what I was first thinking. Okay, so we're looking at two wild rivers. So this has got to be something as made by rivers underground as it's going that way. But again, we're very linear. We're literally going like, oh, you can either go this way or you can branch out a little bit, but literally only here, because this is all we could afford to pay the writers for.
But look at it. You could actually go through the entire dungeon to the end without going to any of the encounters whatsoever.
This sounds like
no. I don't know what module this is, but is this the dungeon, or is this sort of like some of those other modules where this is something you have to go through on your way to the dungeon or to
this is a dungeon you pretty much have to go through in the adventure. This is the Forest Oracle.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are some modules where I know they have like the little side questy ones, that are there to add flavor to the journey, to the actual goal and the actual destination.
John, I've run the Forest Oracle, and this still is not ringing a bell. I put it from my mind.
And that's how bad a module it is, right?
Yes, it's a shocker of a module. It's absolute gubbins.
I don't remember this visual at all. I remember them going through that cave, because they have to go through the cave, but I don't remember this layout. I wonder if they got through without encountering anything.
I
That
think
might
we
be
need to
why.
like chip in and get Yogg a T-shirt that has the cover for Forest
Forest
Oracle on it.
No. So that to me is it's abysmal. It's absolutely abysmal. Yeah, Joe the lawyer. I did a video entitled the worst first edition AD&D module ever, and in the video I did earlier in the week, I was going through all the module codes, explaining what they were, and I showed up the End series and placed a big turd on the cover of the cover of N2.
The cover, yeah.
Can
I
I
saw
just
that.
point out it's also a colossal waste of space map-wise. I mean, there's
Oh,
so much
completely.
empty real estate. They
Yeah.
could have accomplished the same thing dungeon-wise using half the page,
Yes.
and just like made it
And
top
made it
to
much
bottom.
made it much more interesting, and actually had the areas linked somewhat.
Yeah,
and
like
make some
I
sense.
mean, I wish I could point onto the screen, of course, but I can't. But like that starting T junction, if they were to like get rid of the T junction and make it feed directly through the weird mazy, conglomeration,
Yes.
and then on, yes, leave some side rooms, because you always want to have that part where the players are tempted to go check something out, step off the path. Doesn't seem so linear, but it's just so much bad design.
Yeah. Next one. Yes.
Oh, here we go.
Yes.
Oh yeah, that's
Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh,
Yes.
the Alchemist's House. I know
Why
this one well.
is this one of the best designs for an adventuring location ever? Why is it? Why? Just tell me why.
It makes sense.
Yes.
It is what it is, and that's the thing. I like a map that is what it sets out to be. This is a house.
My one gripe, and I noticed this when I was running it. Both, I think I run it 3 times, but only twice did the group actually get to the house. Is it's a lot of the rooms and stuff such are off grid slightly. If you notice, I like it when the rooms align with the grid. It's just easier to draw. Like I said, this is my nitpick.
Yeah, especially when you're creating something from whole cloth. I mean, it's totally up to you how well it lines up to the grid.
Yeah.
It's not like you were converting an actual building with its existing dimensions to a D&D map.
Exactly. And knowing that DMs or players might have to draw this out on a battle mat or something, line it up, please.
Especially top level. Look at that long hallway that's canted across the middle line.
Yeah. It's just a pain in the ass. So line it up and make the gameplay just a little smoother.
Somebody needs to get in there and adjust the grid. Move it to the left, right?
I said it makes sense. I mean, you've got multiple entrances. How many windows are there to go through, to peer through, to scout the place out beforehand? You go there during daylight, you can peer into the windows.
But how many players are going to insist on going through one of the doors anyway?
Oh yeah, they plow through the doors most of the time. But I've had a group go through the windows, and I'd say I've run it 6 times, and only 2 of the groups have actually thought to look through all the windows to see actually what was in there. 14 and 15, that's a broken floor, and 5 and 6, there's the bits of that floor all scattered everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So it all just makes sense. It's got logic to it. The rooms are in the sort of areas you'd expect them to be in a house as well. Number 10, 9 and 10 is sort of the kitchen area. 7's like a dining room. You've got like 2, 3, 4 around there, 5 and 6 down there. They're sort of meeting rooms, living rooms, drawing rooms, studies, that sort of thing. And up at the top, a load of bedrooms. It is just laid out very, very neatly, and you could use it and reuse it, and it's a great map. Map. All right, next one. Oh, is that all of them? Have I gone through all of them? Let me go
through all of them now.
Oh, I thought I'd got more. We had that one. Oh no, here we go. There is one more. One more.
floor plans of the keep.
Yes.
Automatically, I like it because it makes sense. That's
Yeah,
always
there's a
a
logic
big
to
for
it.
me.
Like,
Yeah,
the
there's a
floors
logic.
line up, and some of them are identical. Yeah, so
I also really like the inclusion of underlying spaces on the upper level maps. So like those, for floor 3 and floor 2 and on all that, you can see the roofs below. So those make it really dynamic and playable for, if the party decides to try and squeeze in or out of an arrow slit or something,
Yep.
Cast reduce, crawl through the window, shapeshift
Yeah.
into a weasel, climb up the side.
Speaking
Yeah.
from experience, I hear.
One of my current players just loves the enlarge reduce spell. So far, he uses the reduce spell to pick any lock now because he just shrinks the lock in the door and makes it fall out of the door. And then they already have a big bruiser of a character in the party. The fighter in the party has already got a girdle of frost giant strength, and then he'll enlarge that character.
Of course.
So yeah, that's awesome.
Awesome.
You probably
build
could.
it from Lego.
You
Yeah.
probably could. Yeah, this is UK3. This is the Gauntlet. And this is the Keep of Adlerweg, which the party initially have to get into. Multiple ways in, 3 and 4. 3 on floor, area 3 is on floor 2. That's the main entrance. The Undercroft area, they've got an artifact that allows them to gain access through there. It's also possible to scale the balcony, which is 10, if they've got that capability. They've got to get in. They've got to fight their way up through the dungeon against gnolls in various degrees of intoxication, which is a lot of fun.
Suppose you could
Because
technically fly to the roof if you have that capability.
Well, I'm about to come to that, and because the gnolls have basically found the wine cellar, and they are absolutely bad. Some of them are way beyond coherent, but you get to the top, and this is a keep defending like a pass. And there's like a ledge running around it. It defends the corner of a pass. And across the pass, a fire giant arrives with his army.
Oh, jeez.
This is a level 3 to 6 module. There is a fire giant. He has 4 manticores and 4 screaming devilkin, which fly across and try and get in through the roof and the arrow slits.
How do you know it's a UK module? They use something from the Fiend Folio.
Of course. So they fly across and attack sort of, I think it's areas 21 and 27 through those bigger windows. So you've got flying creatures coming in that direction. You've also got 150 hobgoblins coming down the track and with a battering ram trying to get in area 3.
Nice.
And they've got a battering ram. But if you look above, there are murder holes. So if the party have actually properly explored the dungeon, they will realize that there are murder holes above that entrance. And there's supplies of oil, there's supplies of extra arrows, there's some guards that are still alive that they can untie and use to help the defenses. But a party of about 8 average level 4 or 5 characters have got to defend this keep against 150 hobgoblins with a battering ram, 8 powerful flying creatures, and a fire giant that is lobbing boulders at the place. All at the same time.
super easy, barely an inconvenience.
Oh, but it's
But wait, there's more.
It's a defensible keep. That's why you've got those arrow slits. You've got you've got cover. You've got I think area 15 next to area 3 has got little holes that allow you to view what's going on out in area 3. So you have characters who are blasting spells out from area 15 in trying to hit the massive hobgoblins. You have characters trying to hold the door when they're trying to take it down with a battering ram. You have characters pouring oil through the murder holes. You have
Looks like
characters
there's
trying
a
to defend
Sally gate too on the Undercroft or something on that, like a little tiny tunnel up there or something.
Oh, that's how some ants have got in.
Yeah,
7
but
AD.
it could also be used as a Sally gate, out of the keep.
If you've got a gnome, maybe.
Hey, but this is one of those modules too that I think would really, really pay off if the DM invested in reading up on the siege rules from the DMG and all of that.
Yeah, it's definitely a scenario that sounds like it'd be a lot of fun. I mean, a fortification can really make all the difference in terms, like you say, it's level 3 to 5, but you're effectively getting an enhancement with a fortification and
Of course you are, yeah.
defense.
Yeah.
So,
But
it's an interesting challenge.
And as far as really realistic, believable castles, I think you lose your citizenship if you're a British guy and you make a module with a fake seeming castle, right? I think they kick you off the island.
I mean, it's not a big adventure. This is the main body of the adventure. It's only a fairly small map, but so much goes on in here, and it is so cramped and claustrophobic as well. It works. It works beautifully.
It's a nice
Anyhow,
map too.
Yeah, I like that. Anyway, those were my. I just wanted to demonstrate a few bits and bobs before we actually get into talking about
Dungeon designs.
Dungeon design.
I appreciate that. That was a good start.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. So, firstly, the question: what is a dungeon? In the context, when I answer this, in the context of the game, the dungeon, certainly in the old days, was simply the adventuring area.
Yeah, it's synonymous with any area you're adventuring. It could be the woods. It could be a village. It could be, anywhere. That's how we all used it. Yeah, I'm making a dungeon this weekend. Do you want to come over and help? Or I made a new dungeon. Yeah, we didn't sit there and say, "Oh, I made a new wilderness crawl.
Made a new dungeon. Want to go in and die?"
With a little jaunt through the sewers of a local village. It was a dungeon.
It's a dungeon. It's a dungeon. Yes, and in the context of the game, Dungeons and Dragons doesn't mean you don't have to go into dungeons to fight those dragons. The dungeon is the playing area, and the dragons sort of represented the monsters you fight. Okay, there probably weren't enough dragons in the official modules, but it just encapsulated the idea of the game that it's essentially roaming around interesting areas fighting monsters, and that's what it was in the very early days. Coming back with your loot, drinking, training up, and going back out and doing it all over again until you become a hero.
If you wanted to get snooty, you can maybe define it as a defined space in which the adventure takes place.
There we go. Well, I'm glad we all agree on that first. Unless anyone's got any different opinion. Any different opinion?
Not really, no.
Now, I don't have my Discord open. So there was a second topic I posted in there.
Hold on. Yeah, my Discord slows right down when I'm
As
streaming.
requesting. What is a dungeon? What's essential components to the dungeon?
There we go. Yeah. Essential components to a dungeon. I'll let you lot discuss this before I wade in. So, any of you want to start? What's an essential components of a dungeon?
A purpose.
Mm-hmm.
There is a purpose to a dungeon. Doesn't matter if we're talking about underground, a fort, a forest. The aesthetics are not important, but there is a purpose for why you're there. There's a purpose for why it exists. Why is it here? Why are you in here? What are you here to achieve? This is why. That is one of the key things I think a DM needs to answer before you sit down and just start scribbling incoherently. There's got to be a reason for why it exists, and there's got to be a reason for why the players are there. Answer these first, then you can start building the purpose around that. And it can be gonzo, it can be logical, it can be mathematical, but there's got to be some reason for it being there.
That purpose can just be for the sake of going in and getting treasure sometimes.
No. So purpose, like no, you're misunderstanding. Like if you're thinking purpose from the point of view of the players and their characters,
I
that's
think
not
he's
what
yeah,
I'm
thinking
thinking.
thematically or
Oh,
like
thematically,
why?
yeah.
Yeah, thematically, like why is this crypt existing, and why has it not? Why is it still not in use? And we can go down to the whole thing of like, well, this was from the olden days of like 300-400 years ago. It's not in use right now because dark energies from nearby mages crept in, and the dead began rising again, and it became abandoned. Now the treasures of the long forgotten nobility still lays down there. The players might literally just go like, "Bing, money.
Money.
We're going in there for the money."
Yeah,
Whereas others might say like, the dead are rising. Well, we must stop this. Can it be contained? So forth and so forth. But there's got to be a reason.
I know there's a couple of modules where like it's just because it's new. Like there's some, I think a few were like, a hillside washes away and now you see this has been revealed. And so, that's the call to action. There's a new place to explore. Yeah.
Yeah.
But exploration is just as good though. Like go into the unknown, explore the things that has not become mapped, and then you take it from there. Like that is absolute things you can buy into.
Yeah, and it really adds nuance to your game if as you say there was some kind of lore reason or purpose for the dungeon going into. It's not just, as you say, it's not just I put it there for the players. It's you're also world building, and who built it? Why was it there? What is the impact of its presence on previous society? What's the impact on the current society? So all of that is, players don't care; they just want to kill things and get the loot. But when you're at the point of world building, you want to flesh it out and create that what's the word? Verisimilitude, that grounding. That's I agree. You want the purpose, even if the players never discover it. For you, as the DM, you want that sort of in the back of your mind. Okay, this is what's its place.
Having an internal logic, I think, as a DM, helps you with running that dungeon too. Mm-hmm. Nonsensical dungeons are harder to ad lib. Well, harder and easier. If it's nonsense, you can just make whatever crap you want up. But it's easier, I think, with a dungeon that makes sense and has a place and a purpose in the world. It's easier for you as a DM to flex when your players throw you for a loop or ask those questions like, well, I'm going to look around and see if there's any inscriptions in the wall. You may have never written it in there or may not even be in the text, but it's an ancient temple. You're like, okay, cool. Yes, there's some. Yeah. And then, of course, then you have to go down the rabbit hole that your players ask you 20 questions about what do they show? What do the people look like? What are they wearing? But that's another matter altogether.
Having a bit of logic does help you sort of fill in those gaps. But I was thinking for this question more, what components does a dungeon need in order to function in the game? That's the sort of thing I was thinking of for this sort of question, because you've already answered some of the later questions that I've got. So
ask them still. We can still go at loops.
I think that, like, for me, it needs to have a structure that allows for and invites exploration. Whether that is room to room, typical, like using that the alchemist's house before, right? It's a very straightforward, CQB kind of a situation where you're going room to room and clearing it and checking it out. But a set of caves or whatever is still going to provide that invitation to explore and room to explore. And we already pointed out the crappy linear dungeons and how they rip that away. A dungeon needs room to move and for the players to make decisions. And there needs to be things there for them to do, obviously. And I would argue you don't always have to have monsters in a dungeon. It helps. But you can have hazards, obstacles, puzzles, traps, and still have it be completely fun. Tomb of Horrors is kind of an example of that. But there aren't many monsters in that one. If it's been a while.
My main points when I think of making a dungeon, I like to. It obviously has to have an entrance, but I like to have multiple ways in and out. If possible. Sometimes it depends on the theme of the dungeon, but I do like to, where possible, have multiple ways in and out. multiple routes through it and crisscrossing and different ways round certain areas you could avoid, come back to, areas you could hole up in, a variety of areas, a variety of routes. It must not be linear.
One thing that's often I see overlooked a lot too is I think you need to have empty space in a dungeon.
Yes.
I think it's important, not just for the logic of the dungeon, but also for that playability. That is where your players get to make strategic decisions, where they can fall back to, where they can, they can maybe even put up a barricade to control movement through the dungeon. Those are places that allow the players free thought and open thinking, and in a way that even the most open, flexible encounter is still going to provide some constraints to their thinking. But an open space can really get your players just going, all right, what do we do with this? We got a 10 by 10 room that's got, or let's say a 15 by 15 room that's got a door going out each side, or an open passage out each side. This is a crossroads. How can we use this?
A dungeon needs challenge. Now, that challenge, as we said, can be in the form of monsters, can be in the form of puzzles, can be in the form of terrain. Ideally, a combination of all three, but it depends on the focus. But the challenge must be there, and along the way, suitable reward. Now, whether it's reward for getting something and getting out, or rewards you find in the dungeon, or rewards you find at the end of the dungeon, or all the way along, reward. So flexibility for the players to move around, and it's open space, bit of freedom, challenge, and reward. Those are my main criteria from a dungeon.
Picking out L's comment here real quick. He's talking about towers can't be dungeons. Then I think that they can. They may not be the best dungeons, but some dungeons, depending on the adventure, may be more or less linear.
Yeah,
depending on what they do. Again, kind of going back to what I was talking about with the one map that seemed very linear. If it is a stop along the way, sometimes it's better for it to be linear. The challenge then comes into those to getting into it and getting what you need to get out of it, as opposed to making it the whole affair. Yeah.
With a tower, though, I wouldn't just have the dungeon just being a spiral staircase. There would be rooms coming off that staircase. There would be trapdoors and possibly other stairwells. So you're still providing the freedom to move within what feels like a linear tower.
Exterior windows, the top of the tower, balconies. If it's a ruin, there could be holes in the side of it, providing different options and making it less linear. It's going to be necessarily more linear than some dungeons will.
Yeah.
But you've played Call of Cthulhu, drink, but you can have great fun on a train.
Yes.
And that's about as linear as you can get.
Oh yeah, they're pretty much stuck on that train, but they can move up and down the train, and events will happen.
They can try to go underneath it if they wanted to. If they get really
in that particular adventure, it's not the the location does really add to it, but it's what happens and the interactions on the train that really drive it, and that's where the freedom comes in. They can choose who they want to interact with, and how they want to interact, and it's played out in multiple different ways.
If you think about how many movies they've made that take place on one airplane flight, clearly limited space is not the doom call of a good story or adventure or plot or however you want to put it. So,
well, that module, the Gauntlet, that is not a big dungeon by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah,
but the characters will be spending a long time in there, and it'll be a very, very fraught experience.
not every scenario is going to be the same, and you don't want it.
No.
You don't want every scenario to be the same. You want to
No.
mix it up. You know, you're going to throw the occasional quick gauntlet dungeon in where it's pure linear, and you know, you can have other dungeons which are an excavation where your characters have to plan for a month-long excavation, set up a camp, and have people guarding their camp while they go in bit by bit. So you do definitely want to vary it up anyway. So all dungeon types are valid.
Yeah.
But
I mean, you touched on the whole like expedition thing, because that was one thing I did with I had the fun bit of introducing 5th edition players to 1st edition AD&D, and one of the things that I did was basically explain to them, you're going to go into dungeons. It's going to be dungeons orientated, but I pitched it to them with the whole thing of like it's an actual expedition, because it's down to the whole thing of like lost information from the world before, and the players love that. The idea of like we have to hire people, and we have to do small side adventures to acquire the money to hire the gold, the workers, the foremen, the whole 9 yards. The players got so into the whole thing of like, we're going to go and explore this dungeon, but we're going to bring experts, we're going to bring miners, we're going to bring what did it bring? Carpenters, to make sure that they can build proper mine shafts to support everything. And it played out brilliantly, because there was a situation where they uncovered ogres, and they basically realized, well, we can either fight the ogres and risk losing a lot of people, or we can lure them in and then have a tunnel collapse upon the ogres, and then that became their strategy and their fallback. So the dungeon can become an entity of its own if the players buy into something like an expedition, for example, or if they decide that this is what they want to do with it, and a dungeon they can really take it can bring in a different kind of buy-in from the group.
It's funny how the game you're playing adjusts the core conceits of that of what to do with a dungeon. So in D&D, I think a lot of players just ignore the opportunity to plan for dungeons and just go in. But if you're playing a game like Call of Cthulhu or a pulp adventure game, you might see more of that expedition planning and plotting thing, and I think that's just that a lot of how you form a dungeon depends also on what game you're playing and what the base assumptions of that setting and that game are. I mean, Call of Cthulhu is clearly the base assumption is if you go through and try and fight your way through everything, you're going to die. Because a knife can kill you in Call of Cthulhu, let alone ghouls, shoggoths, everything like that.
As you say, though, the game you're playing, the type of game you're playing, the game system has a massive impact on how your dungeon should be presented, how your dungeon should be constructed, and what expectations the players should have from your dungeon. If you go around exploring in Call of Cthulhu, you don't want a series of traps and puzzles and monsters, certainly the same concentration as you would want in a D&D game. They've got to have the opportunity to sneak their way through, blag their way through, be clever, and not just barrel from fight to fight, because you say they're just going to get killed. They're just going to get killed.
Yeah, one thing you'll see in as far as the dungeon, the tackling the dungeon in Call of Cthulhu. I mean, a lot of that you can just avoid it. You grease the right palms and ask the right questions, and next thing you know, you don't even have to go through it. I'm gonna say you could probably do that in D&D, depending on some of the adventures. Just it's not a thought process that comes into people's minds a lot. It's like, well, what if I just there's that whole like, why don't I just buy a bunch of sheep and run them through the dungeon? It's like.
I mean, Cal Staff here says if you try and fight your way through everything in a D&D dungeon, you're going to die too. That was very much the case in old school D&D.
Yeah.
But it's not the expectation in a lot of modern games. I'm finding, especially the pre-written stuff for 5th edition, everything is weighted around the party being able to cope with whatever fights are being presented more often than not. And there was an expectation. There was an expectation of you pretty much going from in a lot of adventures, going from combat to combat to combat, rest, combat,
The-
combat, combat, rest. There is that sort of structure in a lot of them. Not in every case, but I'm certainly finding it with the one we've been playing on a Monday night.
Yeah.
It's unavoidable set piece fight, a little bit of roaming around, another unavoidable set piece fight.
There has also been, well, if we're going to compare like the modern games, like there's been a shift in like the general culture that you see in.
Yeah.
Again, I'm going to use very broad strokes here because hashtag not all, not.
In general,
in general, yes, there is this shift towards it, but this is where the DM, communication is just going to be the key in this case. The DM will have to communicate out, well, this is what I am like as a DM, this is the preference I have, so on and so on, which is why my 5th edition real IRL group, they have been conditioned to panic by meeting an NPC in the woods. Just a single NPC. They're just like, oh God, it's a hag. We've been invited into a hut. We're going to be eating kids now. We're going to be doing horrible things. We're going to be watching, someone being strung up and skinned alive because this is Oscar. This is what he does to us. It's just.
Yeah, I think I threw my brother for a loop in his campaign. He's running some published stuff for 5e, for example, and when I decided to use my wizard's high charisma, I mean the wizard using his high charisma to bullshit my way through an interaction with a bunch of bandits and a high level wizard, and it succeeded. I'm pretty sure he had a whole session worth of combat in mind when we sat down at that table, but we ended up not only walking away with the wizard being knocked out by his hobgoblin henchmen because I convinced him that the wizard was going to get him killed, but then the hobgoblins signed on to protect the town for the winter in exchange for room, board, and 50% of what he was going to pay them in cash. So it's like no combat.
Move on to the next topic I've got here, and that is, why are dungeons there? And I want something more beyond the simple to give the players something to do.
I'm going to kick this one off.
Well,
I always like to have a reason for my dungeons. Like, are we talking like the game requirement version of why they're there, or why are they there in
the game requirement is essentially to give the players something to
do.
explore,
Like,
a challenge.
I'm mostly a homebrew guy, and so when I'm creating my settings, there's almost always 2 layers of pre-existing civilization in a setting I build in most regions. So that explains a lot of the dungeons. In my current one, I have that plus the fact that there was within 2 generations, a massive withdrawal from the area by all of the hoity-toity nobles because they just couldn't really justify the lands. So they went back to where they came from and left all the peasants behind. Because the peasants are like, we got a bunch of land here. We'll be happy to stay behind while you go back to wherever. And so there's all these abandoned keeps, all of that are dotting the countryside where the local knights and lords had lived, and that provides plenty of little dungeons and stuff. So why are dungeons there is something I always like to build in through layers of civilization and just a conscious understanding of what's in the world. I always build my worlds with plenty of caves, and even if I don't have huge forests, I always mark my maps with a couple of little forests that might be maybe just 12 miles across, or 6 miles across, whatever. They're not huge, but enough to have a little short jaunt in there, like, oh, you have to go into this wood to find the druid that lives there. Okay, well, there's enough travel time in there that you're gonna maybe encounter something hostile on the way, even if maybe that hostile is the druid. But creating those spaces through layers of civilization and mythology and folklore, and just the structure of the world, of the geography and the geology of the world,
The history of the world as well.
And also leaving the ever-present giant free space to work with of having the old ones in your game allows you to plunk anything down there, and whether that's a Lovecraftian old ones or just more of a an Atlantean kind of an old ones, because in one of my campaigns, I've got sort of a you've got a medieval setting that has the remnants of their version of Rome around them, and then there's a precursor culture before them. But you can always just plunk those giant obelisks and megalithic structures that were built by giants or whatever it was, and just allowing yourself that space gives you so much room for why a dungeon's there.
Yeah. Anything to add, Sean?
It's sort of just an extension of what we talked about earlier. The purpose of the dungeon. I agree. I like having the reason. I like, even if the players never discover it, I like having even in the back of my mind in case, especially in my games where I have my players make liberal use of sages. So when they actually take me up on those offers and go to the sages, I guess I better have answers when they start asking the right questions.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah, I mean, they're basically signs of old industry, mines, stoneworkings. They are purpose-built lairs for powerful individuals, mages, towers, lords. They are remnants of past civilizations. They are signs of ancient customs, burial mounds and crypts.
I often like to think of dungeons. Sorry, finish.
They're an opportunity to bring in a lot of lore in terms of things that happened in the past and flesh out the world as well, rather than just be a random place to adventure.
I mean, I'll use a dungeon that I had in my second edition game. I used that as the biggest. I am going to pull behind the curtains of what happens on the DM screen. I'm going to show you things about my world that is going to be very different from your typical Forgotten Realms, probably most other people's D&D campaigns. I mean, again, I'm Scandinavian. I take heavy inspirations from the Norse mythology, and I steal liberally. And one of the big things in my world is that the world is flat because it's a disc inside of a Titan's head, with the sun and the moon being the eye sockets and portals into other realms. To sort of, bring out the whole thing of like, this is the scale of what you are looking at. A Titan being a godlike creature, you are literally just inside of the skull of this very being. This is the ego center of everything that's been located between the different cosmological places. Giants are not native to this world. They are actually travelers from another world of Jotunheim, with the storm giants being their leaders who have come over in their floating castles, and they brought with them all these other giants. But the giants are actually Greek in their inspiration, in the sense that a lowly hill giant can change their attitude, their outlook, their way of life, and transform their way up into a stone giant, then up into a frost giant or a fire giant, and then so forth and so forth.
Take the ordning very literally, kind of,
So what you're saying is that your game world is literally a dungeon for these giants coming over.
Pretty much, because to them, their giant quest, the quest at which they are pushing for, is that they learned that one of the 12 titans, who is their gods, has gone missing, and they were only told by the great titans that he was taken by the god of war of the humans inside the titan skull of this place. So the storm giants have basically gone, we're going to go on a crusade to free our gods. They don't know that that this titan willingly left with the god of war to go and keep the dark god Tion, which is my one evil entity that is the god of all evil and chaos and just or everything evil. He's been kept imprisoned by this titan as its warden for the time being. A small sentence. Go on.
So I'm saying one of the most. Have you finished? I didn't know. I thought you'd just come to the end of your.
That's pretty much the end. And the entire dungeon was a giant laboratory
Mhm.
that a wizard slash list slash demonologist had built, and the players were just stumbling upon all these various things, and most of the players were just like, this is utter lunacy, like what they're reading and what they're discovering, or finding portals to all these different realms. Like it was so much information that it makes them think. So I go like, wow, that's information overload. But that's what one of my dungeon's purposes were. Here is what the world is actually like.
Well, it's a
One
fun
of
way of
my-
looking. Sorry, I was going to say it's a fun way of looking at dungeons as mundane, something mundane to us. Like, somebody's dungeon is basically their security vault where they store their treasures. Where us, we'd have a vault, a safe behind a picture. No, I've built a labyrinth, so you can't get my stuff.
Well, Tomb of Horrors.
Yeah. I think it's also, I mean, you're talking about like, why are they there? There's just the pure fantasy element of it too. We've talked about very mundane places, and then May just kind of touched on it. That what we think of as mundane could be more fantastical, but pure fantasy things like this is a prison of a god. This whole thing was put here to contain this magic item. Those very magical, not what would in the real world would seem nonsensical, building an entire structure to contain for just like one thing, but it makes sense in a fantasy setting.
One of the games I played in, the DM had designed this dungeon that felt not a little nonsensical to start with, and then we were sort of mapping it out and everything, and then we realized that we were inside the dungeon was the inside of an enormous mechanical dragon, which we then had to find our way to the head, and then we had to feed it. He'd created this because he thought that we'd got too many magic items in the party. So we had to feed it magic, as in give up our magic items to get it to take off and use the dungeon to defend the city.
That's cool.
That was quite entertaining.
I just had a flash of a possible post-apocalyptic scenario set on Earth after our society has collapsed, and you got a group of adventurers discovering the Iron Mountain in North America, the repository of all our knowledge, exploring it like a dungeon.
That would be Gamma World.
Not wrong.
And I know Geek's not a fan, but I mean, a good example of that would be Expedition to the Barrier Peaks. We're going to go into this dungeon, but it's a spaceship.
Yeah.
Or you could always Lolth's ride at the end of Demon Web Pits.
Yeah.
But no, I mean there are all sorts of dungeon spaces. I've run a dungeon that was basically picking your way through the spaces in a giant gnarly briar patch. It was a wilderness adventure, and you could go through, it was indoors in that the thorns grew over you, but it was you could see the sunlight filtering through it, and if you wanted to light it on fire while you're inside of it, you could, but, to get through it. But it wasn't. There's a great one in one of the old Dragon magazines from back in the days of yore. That's an encounter with the drow above ground, and the entire dungeon is inside of a tree. It's this massive tree that the drow have kind of moved up into from underground, and it's it's cool. It's the whole space is in a tree, a very big tree, but it's a tree.
I see people are mentioning Desert of Desolation, which of course was based on an Egyptian theme, and the Pharaoh dungeon. Michael's mentioned this. The dungeon in Pharaoh, it had funhouse elements, but it had a theme to it as well. It was a very entertaining dungeon, a real classic dungeon crawl.
Basically a pulp dungeon, and I think a lot of the pulp interpretations of tombs are very funhousey because it's I mean, if we all watch Indiana Jones, it's the measuring the sand, or only the penitent man may pass, and the leap of faith, and
With the Desert of Desolation series, I've said a few times on my videos, I3 and I4 are both excellent modules, and I4, as you said here, Mage, I4 reads badly but plays superbly, whereas I5 is just a bit of a mess. It's too
I found I5 played really well. The group loved
I
it.
hated it. I didn't like it at all. Didn't like it at all.
I enjoyed it.
I thought
It certainly was an escalation. And I mean, in context of my campaign that wherein I ran it is I was building up a campaign finisher. So they
Be
were
right
doing
back,
the
guys.
Desert Trilogy. Then I was putting them through the Quest for the Heartstone. I know it's one of your favorites. And again, anything can work in context. I made the Quest for the Heartstone area like a pocket dimension that was created from a madman's mind. So none of the things that made
did
sense
you use
made
the big
sense.
plastic figures trademark?
Of course not.
No, of course not.
And then I led from Quest from the Heartstone into the Dungeonland modules, which was my campaign finisher.
They're better. They're better.
But anyway, sorry, that's off track. But the point is, I mean, the trilogy of the Desert series, I read through it. And I was like, this is I didn't hate it, but then when I saw it in play and how the players interacted with it, I was like, and they loved it. The groups absolutely loved it. Well, except for the one guy who got level drained from level 8 to level 4. He was a little annoyed. But
I4 Oasis of the White Palm is one of those sort of hidden gems. A lot of people, because it's a middle module in the series, and it's a bit all over the place to read it.
But it's got a setting so you can stay there for a while. You're not having to rush through a dungeon. It's got the sandbox exploration, plus there's a little bit of intrigue going on with the
two factions,
the factions and the
town,
Romeo and Juliet story. Yeah. So it worked really well. The what my players liked about I5 was the funhouse element of these really extreme dungeon, the Mobius Tower with the time reset and the time dilation.
The problem for me with I5 is I saw there was so many good ideas in there. It just didn't make great use of them. That whole Mobius design one, that so much more could have been made of that. That time and distance shifting one was just simply a basic chase sequence. But again, so much more could have been made of it. It just felt like a list of wasted opportunities, as if Tracy Hickman had got these great ideas that he just wanted to pack into 32 pages, when it should have been 2 modules with a better ending and more made of those good ideas. It just didn't gel to me. Didn't gel for me at all.
Well, I mean, that's fair. I mean, we obviously had the 2 differing. I only ran it the one time too, and it's possible I just lucked out, and maybe if I ran it again, I'd just be like, "What the hell? This is no good." But my players
enjoyed it. I didn't. I just didn't enjoy running it. My players liked it. But
And I guess there's the other thing in terms of. I mean, we're getting a little off topic. Sorry, Saxious. A lot of dungeons, they play so much better than they look, than they present. So
I don't think we've gotten off topic, because we're still on the topic of like the design and how we as players and DMs see it. So we're not off topic. It's still very much on to whether the design is appealing in for us. To sort of like go back to the main thing, like, what was the original question? Like, are we still on about what the designs and what purposes we're looking for in the dungeons?
We're still on why are dungeons there, so we have moved off that one, but
Right, fair enough.
We can move on to the next one, which is,
Yep.
Do they need to make sense?
No,
not always.
No, they don't need to. But
Yeah,
there has to be
they
a
don't
reason for
need
why
to.
they
I
don't.
mean,
You have to be a reason for why they don't make sense. Like,
Yes.
there's got to be a reason. There's got to be logic for its lack of logic.
Yeah.
It's
like the
Go on.
Forest Oracle doesn't make sense, and it needs to make sense.
Yes.
To
Whereas
mention your favorite
White Plume Mountain is just an array of very interesting encounter areas that don't make any real sense when all put together, but in play they're just so much fun. You forgive all of that immediately because it's such a wonderfully innovative and interesting challenge. And yes, most of us will know a lot of the encounters in there now because but you got to remember back in 1979, 1980, 81, what year it was that Lawrence Schick did that, but it was all new then. That module was created basically by Lawrence Schick writing down all his favorite sort of locations that he created into one adventure and sending it off, not expecting it to be published as is at all, but they did, because it was just the ultimate funhouse.
Yeah, I think back then though, I mean, there was at least early on, D&D was accepted that D&D was very much still a game.
Yeah.
And it was okay to be more gamist with the adventure design. And then, like anything geeky, we started taking ourselves too seriously. And
Yeah. You should know from having listened in on the Shadow of the Demon Lord game. I don't take myself seriously.
Well, no, I mean, you don't, but I bet you that there's even some parts of that could vary. There are parts of your hobby that you take way more seriously than other people. And that's where all of that comes from. I mean, it's like, at one point I would have been totally okay designing a nonsensical dungeon, but I can't. I'm like, I sat down to try and design a funhouse dungeon. I'm like, I guess I'm just not fun anymore, because I'm like, it has to make sense.
I tend to agree. Although,
man.
like I'll sit with the random dungeon generator. I've done this for my group and just create a random dungeon. And then when I look at the result, it's like, okay, I need to shift some things here. This monster doesn't make sense. I'll clean it up. But you can still have the funhouse elements. It's just a little bit of justification. Why is its monster adjacent to that monster? Do they have an arrangement, or does the one creature know if it's a wild monster? Do they tame it? But anything can work, and that can make a lot of fun. Especially, you don't have to necessarily explain to your players something that doesn't make sense to them, but you've got a clear vision for it, and that can be fun watching them try to parse it. So that
sometimes
in itself,
you get players who try to make sense out of something that you're not meant to make sense out of.
Well, that's their business. Your job is to adjudicate what they do, not to tell them how to think about it. And
I converted the Fighting Fantasy book Death Trap Dungeon into a D&D dungeon.
I tried
that
through
it
as a kid.
And there's a bit in that where you meet just a random servant wandering through carrying some food. And they wanted to know where he'd come from, where he was going, where the kitchens were.
That happens all the time, though.
They're not in the dungeon. They're not in the book.
Yeah, but you're describing the city, and you like make one mention of some freaking newsie on the corner, and they're like, "Oh, what's he about? Is he a cultist? No, he's just some 10-year-old with newspapers."
Yeah. I say dungeons.
That's just players.
Dungeons don't need to make sense, but if you're improvising bits or you're relying on the DM to fill in extra details, it helps if they do, at least at a very basic level, because it can be very hard to improvise your way through a series of very random feeling rooms. In terms of describing them and linking things together, you've got to have some sort of underlying cohesion. Will help. And we have just hit 30 people watching this stream for the first time ever.
Oh, that's your new record.
That is the record. Well done. It might just be Omanal joining. Hello, Omanal. Geek, what do I think of A2? Right. Okay. I very nearly put that in my list, my slideshow at the start, because A2, I like the dungeon underneath, because I think they expanded that quite well from the tournament to the campaign version. But the top level, parts of it are fantastic, but other parts of it just feel like they've been bolted on. And it is very, very linear. There is a right way you can go very quickly through it with just like little bits that have been bolted on that don't always feel as though they fit. And I think it's a little too intricate for its own good. So I don't like the top level, but I do like the lower level. That's a good way of describing it.
Yep.
But no, I say making sense helps the DM and helps the players sort of justify things in their head and work things out, but they don't have to make sense. I think that's the answer to this question. They don't have to.
Yeah.
No, but it, like you said, it helps. And it also helps, it helps the players also perhaps have the DM have a sense of direction for
Yeah.
the players as well once they start coming into into the dungeon, even if it is just a fun house and it's meant to be a bit wacky and zany, and you go and could be doing some weird things. At least having that sort of north star, we're going to be heading in this direction. That's a good starting point. Because I personally just don't see the appeal of having the DM actually roll the die every single time they go through a corridor and then just take whatever the random table says. Because at that point it's like, why?
I can see it being fun as a change of pace. I mean, I would like to try it at some point and seeing what it generates, because it tests the DM's improvisational skills to make it work. And you can sort of, as I think as has happened with some of the encounters in Mage's games, where random encounters have had continuing effects in later sessions based on
reaction checks and stuff.
based on the reaction checks. Yes, yeah.
Mhm. But I don't improvise every session. I go in with a plan. I have an outline, a framework. Sorry, I shouldn't say plan, but a framework for them to play in. And yes, it's good to have those charts when I have to improvise, but I still like them. I like it when they go to a dungeon that I'm at least familiar with. But if I've laid out the thread, then I familiarize myself with it.
Yes, yes.
But I like sections. I wouldn't want to run a table dungeon. Like I'll do it on my own for fun, create a random dungeon and play a group of NPCs I've created through it. But I wouldn't want to run a game like that with 6 players and everything being completely
tried
random.
that, but I didn't find it particularly.
It's good. It's a good thing for refreshing the rules, keeps the rules,
Yeah,
especially with AD&D, where you've got a lot of nuance. And in my AD&D game, I've got a couple of house rules to sort of flesh out things. But so it's good for that. And at the end of it, you've got a dungeon that you can possibly put players through. That's the other fun part. But yeah, I wouldn't want to do that as a regular. If I was going to do that, I'd just go out and buy Hero Quest. Okay, let's lay out the board and play Hero Quest.
I have heard folks using the random dungeon generator for solo play.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
Absolutely. It works well for it. It is actually kind of fun. It gave me a good fix during the pandemic when my games were down, and like I said, you end up with a dungeon out of it. I've got a few pages of maps that I have randomly created. It's like, yeah, these will work. Funhouse style,
I don't have the time to even think about that at the moment. So, but maybe one day. So I do want to say thank you to Squirrel Hermit for the $5 anyway. Good to see you well, Squirrel. I hope everything is okay and cleaning up out there. I have heard mixed things about what's going on, but I'm no expert in the field, so I'm not going to cast any.
I just recently learned how common those kind of train accidents are in the US. They just never make the media.
But I think in this instance, it was the scale of it and what it was carrying. And
I guess like a month ago, the same thing happened in another state, almost as bad. It's like, but anyways, that's neither here nor there. As far as dungeons making sense, I had a weird idea. My brother and I were talking about the dungeon as a demi-plane. Actually, like where there's this dungeon, and like all dungeons kind of touch on it, and it's this place of its own, and it has little mouths that open up randomly around the world, and even how that could be used in a campaign. You like fast travel across your world by going through the dungeon, and because it's an interdimensional space coming up somewhere far away, because the space is different in the dungeon, but that also allows you to have this massive mega dungeon that makes sense.
The sentient dungeon.
Exactly. The dungeon as a thing. And it would constantly, almost in a Ravenlofty kind of way, it might open up and like lure people in and then like close, and then you run into people who've been in the dungeon for a while. There might be little enclaves.
Where did you come from? I want out. Where did you come from? Where's the exit?
Exactly. And how fun could that be to just like run either as a campaign or intersperse into your campaign?
The two Lewis Carroll TSR adventures are designed to be. It's described as being a demi-plane.
On the mountain in Forgotten Realms. beneath the water deep. Isn't that like that? Well, you could make it like that effectively.
That's the Dungeon of the Mad Mage.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the one. Because that seems quite easy. Because the way it was sold to me is that there can be random portals, and you can be walking in one area, and then bam, you walk between two trees, and you've been teleported into the Mad Mage's.
Well, and if you remember,
dungeon.
like that's how Gygax originally described the dungeon. That's where my idea came from, honestly. Is just
Okay.
remembering Gygax talking about how the dungeon is this sort of mythical underworld that that's why it has the weirdness it does. Why, revolving rooms would be an engineering nightmare with medieval technology or even magic, but yet they exist. Doors that disappear. The fact that he actually says, go ahead and erase entries and exits to your dungeon and rewrite them over time. He's just like, whenever you get tired of a part of your dungeon, just it's no longer there, and you write a new part in. That got me thinking. I'm like, that really sounds like a demi-plane. And if you could actually then frame it in your game setting, and there are mundane dungeons, with the things we were talking about before that make sense that people had built or do build, but then there are the dungeon, and sometimes it like dips a little tentacle which into the prime material, and there's a cave where there wasn't a cave before, or why is there a door in the side of that mountain that I've never seen despite having lived on this farm at the foot of the mountain for the last 3 generations. And then that gives you a easy way to explain, like, locals say that this giant vaulted double door appeared one day, and everybody's like, well, I got to check it out.
What's the name of that Scottish village that is said to
Brigadoon.
Brigadoon, yes. Appear once every 100 years or so, yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
I mean, that's right there, talking about dungeons and why they have to, where they come from, what they make. Do they make sense? A village like Brigadoon would make fair game for a D&D adventure. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's been used in a adventure somewhere.
But did they make it a musical?
I don't know. That comes down to the players at the table, I think, because any adventure can be turned into a musical with the right players.
I did turn a paranoia scenario into a musical once, and it was unfortunately me singing random sporadic lines from 80s hits during the adventure. So it really was. It wasn't very musical. The term musical really didn't fit that. Caterwauling, I think, best described it. All right. So we've agreed they don't need to make sense. It can often help if they do, but they don't have to. They don't always have to. And the last thing I got written here is examples of good and bad dungeons from official material.
I'm going to be horrible here.
I've already shown you some slides of examples of what I think are good and bad. Do you have any other examples you could come up with from official material you've played, where a dungeon really worked or really failed? It doesn't. And by the dungeon, just think of the adventuring environment. So it doesn't have to be pure D&D module. It has to be, it can be anything.
It's funny because I know I've played bad ones. I mean, Forest Oracle, obviously. I tried to run it and fix it, and it still just crashed and burned. I'm just trying to think of others. Like, I know you and I disagree on B9. B9 has poorly designed stuff that somehow works despite itself. Like The Great Escape, which is one of the mini scenarios in B9. It plays amazing. Every time I've run it, the players have loved it. It just plays so well. But just looking at the design, it's horribly designed. It's a keep with no entrance or exit. Right? There's literally no entrance or exit to this keep, and the players have to, of course, find an escape. And they usually just hop out a window. And it occurs to me, well, of course, the players aren't there to map the whole thing. They never notice that there's no actual exit from this keep because they usually hop out a window, the first window they see. So it's kind of funny. It's at glance, it's horrible, it's dumb, but it plays amazingly well. And they could easily fix that by just designing the keep with a logical layout. But I'm trying to think of one that ostensibly should have been good but didn't play well. I think you too, actually. The second Saltmarsh one is one of those ones that is logically laid out, but doesn't play as well. That's one I can think of. But it's been
That's
15 years
down
since
to
I
the
played that.
nature of the adventure, I think.
Yeah,
And the fact that a clever party can suss it out very, very quickly, and most of it goes unexplored, which is a shame. But that layer, that layout, that layer can easily be repurposed for anything else, because the layer itself, the layout of the layer itself, is fine.
Yeah, it's well laid out. It's logical, but every time I played it once, and I tried running it once, and both times it was kind of a meh.
Yeah, I mean, I've run it twice. And both times it was over in roughly a session because the players worked out what's supposed to be happening. So I've never had anyone go rampaging through, apart from when I first bought the adventure and didn't realize what it was all about. And I had one friend sat there with controlling a whole party of characters, and I was 11 years old and didn't know the rules. And he just ran in and killed loads and loads of lizard men. There we go. That was fun. You can have all this experience points. All these experience points. There we go. But one I thought was going to be very complicated to run because of the mechanics of the adventure, but actually played a lot better, was U3, the final enemy. I don't know if you've ever run that one.
Played but not run. Every time I tried running Saltmarsh, nobody ever got that far. But I played in the campaign that got to it.
I ran it online, entirely theatre of the mind. I was absolutely petrified because of the size of it, the number of individuals in there, the number of individuals in the party as well, because they've got a team of guards helping them and a team of lizard men helping them. And I think partly due to its layout and the fact that it's designed to be a scouting mission, the players really got into it. It turned into a brilliant hit and run with various routes through and choke points. It was very nicely done, but I had to really work to keep it going. We were playing at Theatre of the Mind, and it wasn't as complicated as I thought it was going to be. But I can see Elfbait sort of lost on this because you don't use a lot of published material, do you?
Yeah, I'm trying to think, because I almost always run homebrew. I can't say I've run any modules, and back when I actually played as a player so long ago.
Have you ever taken, for example, a published adventure and reworked the map for your own purposes?
Not usually. I mean, I will borrow buildings and stuff like that, but I also like mapping. So I just draw my own all the time. I'm horrible that way.
So this point in my list of topics really falls flat on you, and I don't think you're one for published stuff either, are you, Saxius? I don't think.
I usually go for my own stuff as well. I've done a number of published ones, like Curse of Strahd, a bit of I6, and recently I've started running my players through the Red Hand of Doom, which is a 3.5 module. Now, I could bring out the Red Hand of Doom because it does have a number of mapped out set pieces, which I give Red Hand of Doom so much praise, but I think this is probably the one point where I really sort of go like, this is a drawback for the entire module. The final bit of that module, it goes from being this overland big combat. You're fighting against an army. You're taking on a hobgoblin horde, professional soldiers. You have to deal with assassins, dragons, demons. You even at one point have to come and negotiate with a lich. All of these like really intense things where you're traveling over land. And the way that the module tries to justify it is that you have to go and assassinate the leader of the enemy army because they're going to be regrouping. And you're thinking, okay, well, how are we going to do that? And it turns out to be, well, you now have to break into a dungeon where he lives and resides, and then it turns from this overland grand, very epic storyline into we're now gonna be
Hand drawn.
very nicely made. But yeah, it suddenly turns into this sort of, we're now going to go into a place and it's going to be a room by room clearance until we find the leader and we can kill him. And that to me was almost a wrong turn to all of this. So I often have to rework that for we're now assaulting the enemy rather than what the book normally says. And that's probably the one time where I think I've had a really great module that I will run over and over. But it's just always that last stretch where it's now just kick in door, find the enemy, kill enemy, go home mentality that suddenly just kicked in. I don't know why that was added in, or why the explanation was as weak as I think it was.
Find myself trying to find more stuff that I've drawn, but because I can't share images on Geek Stream. You'll have to come by one of my streams where I can share my dungeons.
With me, and I can do presentations.
Well, I'm going to shill for Elfbait here. He gave me a little one-off scenario that's going to be featuring in my review caps as soon as the players encounter these characters.
Oh, fun!
Excellent.
Bolg the Slaver is in the region of the keep and operating, so players will eventually cross his path.
And to be fair, I did pinch that from Hawk the Slayer, but at least the NPC.
Okay.
But I wrote it up.
Next one, just off the top of my head, what is your generally if you're creating your own dungeon, what is your starting point other than just the entrance?
The end.
You start at the end.
I start. Where is the big event? And then I work my way towards what is the linear path towards it. So I almost go reverse. You start here. This is where the big thing is. Make sure that's given the space that it requires, and then build the pathway that the main person would take to leave, and then branch out from there.
Yeah, for me, I start more thematically rather than physically drawing the map. I what's the purpose of my map, and then I kind of will often sketch an outline. If it's a freestanding structure, at least I'll sketch an outline, kind of what I want the structure to look like, and then I'll start to fill it in. It starts very loose and sketchy.
Yes.
If I'm doing a map set in a natural environment, I'll often sketch the topography a bit. And if it's in a hill, I want to know kind of what the grade is and stuff like that. And kind of if a good example of that would be the old Caves of Chaos, where they have the whole gradient,
the valley,
lines.
yeah.
But yeah, I think it's because I design dungeons that I try to have an internal logic. I don't so much design them with as much of an artificial gamist attitude. So it's less about, there is going to be a goal in there, but it's less about building the structure to fit that goal. I will build the structure and then place the goal in there. If it's an old temple, and there's a big monster in there, then I have to have a big room to hold the monster, but then there also has to be a way for the monster to get in and out. So it's either got to have a big door or a hole in the side that he's dug through or something. But yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but
I like to think of what's the big alpha monster that's going to be living in the dungeon, and then design, if I'm designing as opposed to randomly generating, of course, design around that. What's living there? Is it intelligent? Is it savage, et cetera, and then go from there. An intelligent monster will have created its defenses. Right? It's a wizard living there. It's going to have, and its layer is going to obviously be dependent on what the creature is. It's coming to some kind of savage monster. The defenses are going to be a little less intelligent. but an intelligent creature or group of creatures, then that's going to determine the surroundings as well, traps that you might encounter, how well the treasure is protected, things like that. So I like figuring out what lives there.
Yeah.
I'm going to share everyone. I mean, I do have a very small adventure on Drive Through RPG that I put on there a long time ago.
Cool.
And this is it's only a very small one just to test the water, and that was the map for it. Able to see it?
Still
Not yet,
loading.
still loading.
Still loading.
Internet is booting up.
Yeah, man.
We have our standards.
There
Here
we
we go. Yep.
There we go.
That's a nice clean map.
Yeah.
What'd you draw that? What'd you draw that with?
Actually, my friend drew. I drew it out on paper. My friend converted it to a digital format.
So you cheated.
Now the starting point for me in this one was the underground river. I drew the underground river and the pool, and then just thought I wanted a natural feeling cave network based around that. The way in is to wade in along the river at the start.
Yep.
At the top.
Piranhas.
Quippers.
The main. You can actually succeed in that adventure by wading in, going up the little steps into area 2, finding the corpse of a sheep in area 2, and running away. But of course, characters aren't going to do that. The main denizen lives in area 4, but there's also they go roaming around, and there's some nasty stuff in 7, 8, and 9 down there. But
I do like the entrance through the river. That's cool.
Yeah.
And on a map like that, you'd almost, if the river is, and the natural feature would be the logical place to start, because everything's going to be built around that.
I mean, it was only meant to be a one session scenario, and just something very, 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 very short. And I've run it twice, and both times the players didn't just go in, find the sheep carcass, kill the creature that stole the sheep, and get out. They examined everything, and the oozes in 8 and 9 got them on both occasions. But I'm not going to say what it is, because I'm not. I'm going to put it into a little sort of booklet, I think, of small adventures, because by itself it's nothing. It's not very. I'm not that proud of it now. I want to convert it to old D&D, because I wrote it for 5th edition. So
yeah, Leper 5e.
Yes.
And now I'm searching for Leper on drive-through.
You might find it if you search on drive-through for Leper. You might do.
The missus just left.
It was just a testing the water type thing.
Mhm.
But yes, it did feature lepers. But I'll just remove my screen from it. But that's just something I knocked up. It took me probably half an hour to sketch out the pencil version of that map. But
pencil is generally quicker.
I've got a lot more intricate. I've got a lot more intricate ones I've done, but they're not easily accessible now.
Yeah, when I was going to and from work all the time, I had this awesome. I still have it, but it's fallen out of use. I had this like 300 pages moleskin small graph paper book. It was basically a journal with just graph paper throughout it. If you figure both sides, it's about 600 pages of like A5, and it was just fun. I'd sit there in the office and just map, at lunch, map, just come out with dungeons and just play around with it, and whatever pen I had handy. So it's my DM journal. I jot down trap plans and adventure hooks and everything else in it. So it was always handy.
Nice.
I did find these online. Actually, these are great. These are little like 60-page very plain, but they're super fine grid, relatively fine grid and lightly colored, so they're perfect for just keeping handy and build. I mean, you could build an adventure in one of these, and then just catalog it, while all the text and everything on it. So, but
my problem with the event, I did that little one, and I thought, right, I'm going to go a bit bigger this time, and I got 30 or 40 pages into a bit of a monster of an adventure that I've run groups through multiple times, but it just sort of ground to a halt. It was too much to undertake for someone who knew so little about actually putting adventures together.
I have dreams of completing a mega dungeon. But
yeah. The adventure worked, but it's just masses of notes in a folder. that's the problem.
Yeah. I have many more maps than I have adventures made. So
I'm the opposite. I've got more adventures than I've got maps. Just because there's so much going on in here that I sort of just sketched down. But when it comes to actually making the maps, I usually go like, theater of the mind. I prefer that. It'll become important when it's important.
I like to run. It depends on the game I'm running whether I find theatre of the mind better or not in terms of the DM running entirely theatre of the mind as well. If I'm running D&D, I will run from a map, but the map will be for my eyes only, ideally. But if I'm running Call of Cthulhu, I'm quite happy to improvise new areas and go off adventure. But it depends on the game you're running, depends on the system you're running, depends on the style of game you're running. Right, so other places to start. I mean, I like to start with an idea or a theme first.
That's kind of where I start too.
The first decision is, what is the makeup of the dungeon? Is it caverns? Is it castle? Whatever. And I will always start with a map. And quite often I will just sketch out a central room and just branch out from there and often just try and fill in the page. There's not always rhyme or reason to it. It's just a case of filling in the page with something that looks interesting and then trying to make some logic from it.
I
guess that comes from me playing a lot of the old Funhouse adventures as well. But I have this inner need for things to have verisimilitude as well, so it doesn't always work.
I think one of my favorites thematically was there was an island for my nautical campaign. I wanted the players to travel across the island, but it was crisscrossed by all these crevices. Basically, the island was volcanic, and so it had shifted here and there and split in parts. And in those crevices, they would find like partially buried and unearthed, sunken bits of temple and old city. So they could go down into these crevices if they wanted to, and they were dangerous to go down. Like there was a manticore lair and a bunch of ghouls in one, and but it was just fun to draw them out because that's one thing I also like to do is talking about starts. Sometimes just the challenge of setting a design constraint for your dungeon can really, like for example, I want to make a monastery that is clinging to the side of a cliff, and that's where I'll start. And then like the map kind of comes out of that. What does that look like? How much can I map? Map of this? How do I work the space? So it's a lot of the theming that goes on for me.
Someone mentioned mega dungeons and Undermountain.
There you go.
Yeah. A friend of mine tried to run us through Undermountain like 20 years ago, and he didn't have the endurance to run it as a campaign.
And one of my favorite OSR mega dungeons has got to be Barrow Maze. I like how it is set up. There's a mega dungeon, but each of the barrows are different dungeons to various extents. that allow you to have little dips into the dungeon and eventually find your way into the mega dungeon. So it allows you to play that same bit of material on multiple levels. So many mega dungeons are such a commitment from the very beginning, but Barrow Maze kind of gives you that option. Like, okay, well, you can play Tomb Raider all you want and go around and dig up all the different barrows, but eventually, you can either follow the leads down further, or if the rest of the players are just like, this isn't, we're done, we're tired. You're like, all right, cool. Well, then, let's go on to the next thing.
I played in a short game which involved the first 3 or 4 barrows that were closest to safety, and so I never found the barrow maze as is described. We were just going into little barrows and killing some undead and running away with our lives, hopefully.
My current campaign and my players seem, I've thrown a lot of barrows at them, but thematically for the world, it makes sense because there used to be a kind of a Celtic tribal society that inhabited the area that built a lot of these old barrow mounds, and so they've been unearthed or reused. Like one of them was being reused by a Temple of Orcus to build a bigger temple on top of, and I had a Lamia had dug her way into one and was using it as a layer. They just make good spaces to create dungeons, and they can be as big or as small as you want, because it may just be a barrow, but who knows what's beneath it, or he has dug up into it, or what was hidden below it, or what was it built on top of, or so they're good spaces to use.
One of the first big largish dungeons that many of us will have seen will have been the Keep on the Borderlands and the Caves of Chaos.
Never heard of it.
No, of course you haven't.
The what of the what?
Now, I know people have got very strong opinions about Keep on the Borderlands because for many, it was the first adventure they ever played. The nostalgia is strong. It is a pure sandbox. Now, with that adventure, I loved the Keep itself, though I wish there'd been a bit more flavour put in there. I prefer the Village of Homlet. I'll say that now. As a module, I prefer the Village of Homlet because I like the fact that the town itself feels more
fleshed out.
More
fleshed out.
Yeah,
I know I had a dungeon master who actually made the Village of Homlet the village outside of the keep back when we were kids.
Yeah, you could combine the two.
And the moat house was the keep that was there before they built the big keep. So
yeah.
That way you got the best of both worlds.
But I still struggle to feel inspired by the Caves of Chaos. Yes, I mean, design-wise, it's got tons of entrances, tons of ways in, tons of routes through, so much flexibility, but it just doesn't inspire me. And I can see people leaving chat in droves.
Bye.
I could visually see the numbers dropping.
I feel like both the Caves of Chaos and the Keep were designed, because it is a basic module. I think they were left intentionally vague and undefined, hoping that as the DM got his legs, he would start to flesh something out of that.
Yes, B1 or B2, sorry, Caves Chaos is very much or Keep on the Borderlands a learner module as well. It's designed to teach you how to DM, whereas Village of Hamlet is not. Village of Hamlet is, here's the scenario. We've fleshed it out for you. You're not learning anything. We're assuming you know what you're doing. Play. Whereas Keep the Borderlands is a learner module. So a lot of that was, I think, deliberately left out. So DMs could learn to flesh out, to name the characters and give them personalities and motivations and all that. So. And
the monster, the wide cross section of monsters in the caves allows a DM to try out a lot, and the players are really a good sampler of what to expect from D&D. And
it's not difficult to justify why they're all there together. I hear one of the main criticisms I hear about it is, what are they all doing together? Why are they living in such proximity? It's like, well, that's for you to figure out.
And there's a cult there, so
yes.
I think it's implied I think we've talked about this before. Mages, it's kind of implied that there might be something else building in the
Yes.
caves, like the cave. Think of it as sort of the Isengard of basic D&D, right? You've got something building up there, and it's going to eventually flood over.
Exactly, but you don't have to. A DM doesn't have to. They can just say, no, these tribes just happen to have a very loose truce. They're living in proximity because there's a relative safety and fortifiability of those caves from the human keep, those evil soldiers coming to maraud and steal their loot every once in a while. But yeah, absolutely. The framework is there for you to infuse whatever you need to.
Also, if you keep in mind the D&D, and maybe this is sort of, apply back engineering logic. Later on, as we get more experience with D&D, we realize that goblins, orcs, bugbears, and they're all relatives. They're all related species. So maybe they're just living there in some sort of grumpy coexistence because, they're useful to one another.
It's Gygax's treatise on communism. Look how evil
real estate
communism
is at a premium, and so they all have to live in their little, estate terraces, and like.
But obviously you don't need me to say how much I quite love Keep on the Borderlands. I agree with you. I think Village of Hamlet is fantastic. I think it's a great setting. There's really no one or the other for me.
I mean, that top level of the moat house is so well done as a ruined moat house. That feels it's got an authenticness to it. The dungeon section had a little bit more random dungeon to it, which didn't entirely make sense. But the moat house itself, it encouraged. My players enjoyed that upper moat house bit so much they wanted to rebuild it. They wanted to make something of it, and that's a good thing in my opinion.
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to present you with another one, and we have sort of mentioned this in passing, but what do you think of this map?
Dun, dun, dun.
This dungeon, which will be coming in any minute now.
It's a giant middle finger. Oh, it's In Search of the Unknown.
It is indeed In Search of the Unknown.
Ooh, how Gygaxian.
Yes, right.
Again, it's one that you look at it and not knowing the dungeon or anything, it looks very busy. But again, it plays well. I've run it several times over the years, and it's light enough. It's good for low-level characters. You can do excavation style where the players can go in, search a few rooms, fight a baddie or two, and then withdraw to rest. But it certainly does look busy. But the other thing to remember is the way the module is designed is that not all of those rooms are full. You actually meant to stock them.
No.
I do feel like the entry there is a little wasted in yes, you have the two secret doors that provide alternate entrances in and out of that entrance, but at the same time, they don't give you much of an advantage to doing so.
I mean, my opinion is like you say, I think it is too busy. I think there are too many passages that really serve no purpose.
The giant spiral in the lower left.
It's all those spirals. And there were multiple areas of just sort of like maze-like passages. It was supposed to be the home of two great people
and their army.
Two great people who were insane, clearly.
But you can't imagine two great people and their army living in an area with the passages laid out as they are. The rooms, yes, the rooms themselves are fine. It's just too many spaghetti-like passages.
Yeah.
Well, that's so they draw invaders in and get them lost in the labyrinth.
If they were positioned in such a way, I could buy that as weird fantasy logic. But like that spirals off in the lower corner where like nobody's going to go if you're invading.
Yeah. But yes, it was very much designed in a day when D&D was the expectations of things making sense were not there. It was dungeon delving for the sake of dungeon delving.
The
It
game is
was
the dungeon.
I
Mhm.
do
The
want
game
to
is
point
dungeon.
out. I do want to point out something that both L and Omenal have just said in the chat, talking about digging their way through the walls. I've had players do that, and it has had mixed results. Where the players would just have gone like, "Well, we know it's a dungeon crawl that we're in, but we would like to skip past the next. We just want to go straight through this and see how deep we can go." And just either knock down walls or just start literally just tearing up floors and start digging downward to see what they could find.
Good luck digging through a 1 foot thick stone wall. It doesn't seem like much on a map, but in
when you're
practicality,
first level and you haven't
Yeah.
got a
Well,
password.
first
spell.
level, yeah, no, absolutely. But
without making noise too. It's like that noise is going to attract all the wandering monsters.
it's a cone of
I
silence.
mean, when you're higher,
like,
when you're higher level and you've got a silence spell, sure.
yeah,
but-
that was,
sure.
that was- like, well, they were high enough level to have silence, so
There
it
you
was
go.
it was just a matter of like, can we memorize it enough, and can the barbarian be hitting with his hammer into this area to just for us to make work of it? That was just, it was a fun thing that I saw there in the chat, because it was like, yeah, no, I have had players do this, because it was just like, we're just gonna go this way, this way. Damn, be the whatever the Oscars made for the map.
And a map that was criticized next, and it got amended for a later release because people couldn't think in 3D. And it's a map I like. I don't think it deserved to be criticized. Has that one come up?
Yep.
Yeah.
A1 slave pits.
Yep. Okay. Now, I like this map. There were multiple entrances. People complained. How do you get into area 9 and 10? Can anyone see?
Can't see. That might just because I'm blind. Oh, there's 10. Okay.
Well, 9 and 10 look like they're big open areas with terraces above them, if I'm reading that right.
Precisely. You climb over the walls. The module didn't spell that out. And people didn't think of this in 3D. Read the description. 9 and 10 are open to the elements, and it describes the area as having an outer wall of about 15 feet, however high it was. And you had to read the room descriptions to realize that 9 and 10, you climb over the walls to go in the wall to the right of 1A, for example. You go over that to get in. In a later version, they put a little connecting doorway to allow easier entrance into this. I don't think it was necessary. It just required the players to think outside the box. But the problem was
Maybe a clearer
DMs,
map.
but the problem is DMs didn't think outside the box or didn't think logically to realize, hang on, players can just go over the walls. When my players played this, they sent a familiar in which ran into the very, very nasty enemies that are in 9 and 10, made its saving throw, managed to escape, very luckily for the mage, and then the party retreated. They're in Highport, which is an absolute cesspit. They wanted to buy some rotten meat and some poison the meat, and they threw the meat over the wall. And with carnivorous creatures inside, it's going to deal with the enemies. Which to me, that was like, I was like, well, the players are going to be rewarded for that, because that's a good way of doing it, and they've thought about it. They've thought about what they're going to do, and they've used the walls and the terrain and the fact the area inside is open to their advantage. But yes, they did get very lucky with the saving throw. A half hit dice furry creature doesn't have a particularly good chance of saving against being petrified, but but it managed it. But that's a map I quite like because of the multiple ways around. And it was a tournament adventure, but it was a tournament adventure that, okay, in the tournament you were meant to go in at 1A and pick your way through, but it was well adapted, well built upon for the campaign version, which is why I like that particular module, A1 Slave Pits of the Undercity.
I am gonna.
I love how the
dip
legend needs overturned tables.
Oh,
Indicated.
you off, are you, Statues?
I'm gonna have to dip now.
Letters,
Sorry.
actually. No, no worries.
All right, see you later, Sections.
All right, cheers.
Yeah, I love how they have to indicate overturned table on the legend there.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing wrong with going to that sort of detail, though. But that's because it was a tournament adventure. They needed to get things in place so that those playing the tournament would get the same descriptions and have the same environment to deal with. Probably the most interesting encounter in there is in Area 3. I think Area 3's got loads of ghouls and ghasts. And Area, is it 5B as well, has got a very horrible plant. Well, no, that's what I've just been saying, Gene. There is a way into the courtyard, and it's over the wall. You're meant to go over the top. It's not covered. It's open to the elements. So you're meant to be able to scale the wall to the right of 1A.
I mean, in terms of verisimilitude, it may not make sense, but you'd probably have a door. But
yeah, I mean, but the point is, Area 10 has got basilisks in, and Area 9 has got, I think it's a white or a couple of whites in there. And it makes sense that they're walled off, and the people that are living inside do not want to get involved in them, and they're used just to punish prisoners. You're kicking off, over the wall you go. Have a meal, basilisks. Yeah, but I think not. Is it just one white slan in number 9, or is it? I think what was it 2? I know there's basilisks in 10.
One's enough if you're not sent in with any gear.
Precisely. But yes, a 3D version of the temple would open. But I said my group I was playing with realised that straight away and used it to their advantage, which was pretty good. And from the same series, another map I like, because of the variety of routes, variety of escape routes, is this one.
So if you tunnel to the letters on the map, can you actually explore the letters, the dungeons of the slave lords?
I wonder. Now, the thing about this map is it's meant to be, you're under a volcano, and this is all meant to be sort of natural caves, cracks in the caves that are beneath the volcano,
tubes,
and
things like that.
there are multiple ways out, and I think it's 3 or 4 different exits, but the challenge is actually getting to them when you've got nothing. You start this adventure, this one, in Area 1, right in the middle, with absolutely nothing apart from your loincloths. You can't see. You've got no food, you've got no water, no weapons. If you're going to hit something, you've got to take your loincloth off and fill it up with sand or stones or pick up a bone. And so there's no worry about them attempting to map the place, all those twists and turns, because they're feeling their way along the walls until they find a light source. And I think that's a great little dungeon. I don't think it's not quite all on screen, unfortunately, because of if I just zoom out, there we go. You can see it a bit better now.
Yeah.
So you can
Hey,
see
try
it's
running
an
that dungeon through a group of fifth ed players who aren't used to old school style play. I'd be curious to be fly on the wall in that section.
They'd absolutely hate it. They're trying to use their character powers, and you're meant to use your brains. You're meant to pay attention to what's around you. When you tread in something black and gooey, you're meant to realize it's tar, and you can pick up a piece of wood, and if you can find a way of setting it on fire, you can make a makeshift torch out of it. If you want to go swimming, there are reeds you can use. You can pick that are hollowed out. It provides you with the means of getting out there. You've just got to really pay attention and use your brain.
Engage with the environment. Yeah,
exactly. And I think it's a good. It's unusual. It's got the dungeon's got verisimilitude. It's got purpose. The denizens in there fit the environment, and it's got a good blend of puzzles which feel natural. But I think we've hammered this topic, haven't we? Already.
Pretty much. I mean, dungeons are kind of straightforward. It was a linear topic, but
Yeah.
You railroaded us.
I do apologize. Let me bring up the Slaver Stockade thing, as I mentioned that earlier. Right.
Matt wants to know about traps. What kind of traps do we put in? Do you like to use?
Yeah. I like disorientating traps. But this is the Slaver Stockade. Once on screen at the moment. The blue area is the tournament area, which is the linear sort of tournament progression.
Yeah.
All the non-blue bits, the bits that were bolted on to fill it out. But the main route through is still very, very linear. The map was hard to read because the size of the key at the bottom was it was too big, far too big. The main map needed to be bigger.
Yeah. As far as traps go, as mentioned, traps.
Well, General Nut says here, gotcha versus puzzles, and that actually does bring up something interesting. Is I love puzzle traps. At least I love putting players through puzzle traps. I can't say I necessarily love them myself. Sometimes I enjoy them, but I think puzzle traps are interesting because how many, you got to use them sparingly. I think or give players the time to ruminate on them. How many puzzle traps are designed to be solved immediately to progress, as opposed to something that you have time to think about?
Yeah, I actually shared a couple of trap ideas on Yogg's Discord the other day that I designed. I like making traps that have a lot of working parts. I mean, I'm not afraid to use yield pit trap or falling stone, but I do like. I'm kind of a fan of the Grimtooth's traps, but not in the dickish way, but more in the many moving parts, sort of take a little time, to execute kind of way, to where the players can look at them and see that there's something going on, or there are decisions to be made in the execution of the trap, as opposed to you didn't detect the pressure plate, you're full of darts now. But also I like using obstacles and hazards that are traps in anything but name alone. Because they often make sense in a dungeon, and the players don't feel like you're being a jerk. If the ground is crumbly because it's weird volcanic crust and it's going to make you fall into a hole, they're maybe going to be less pissy with you when they fall through the floor than you failed the ground opens up beneath you and you're
right. Well, traps like the dungeon itself should have a purpose and a place. I don't like dungeons that have a trap every 10 feet, and it's like, okay, but what was the logic? But if somebody's designed this dungeon to be a stronghold, they're going to trap it. There's going to be obstacles. Puzzle traps should be, I think, a little more sparing. You're not going to have a puzzle trap on somebody's barracks, but a puzzle trap that leads to the treasure vault is not unreasonable.
I have a.
Of course,
I
of
did.
course.
I did a stronghold for some Zvarts in a game, and it's out on a precipice over this massive chasm in underground, because Zvarts are kind of underdarky things. But the main entry into the fortress, you come into the main courtyard, and the entire floor of the courtyard can be dropped out, even though it's overwatched by parapets. And it drops down into a fighting pit where they then have cages on the side where they can let like giant rats in there to attack the party. But then that's also connected to the dungeons, which is also connected to the cesspit where the Odiog is and stuff like that. So it still makes sense. Like they can drop you in there, they can go get you and drag you to the dungeon, or they can drop you down there and kind of Jabba the Hutt you and watch you fight the rats. Or they can just drop you down there and pepper you with arrows and burning tar if they want to. But it's a trap, but it makes sense in the logic of that fortress as a defense, an extra defense against invasion.
Now,
And my party completely avoided that stronghold.
because we're talking about traps. I've just brought up this particular module map.
Soshkan?
Yes, this is the lower levels of the Lost Caverns of Sargent. And in order to gain access to that central room, which is where the main treasure is, it's a very simple sort of idea of you go in there to get the loot, basically. But in order to gain access to there, well, there were 6 doors, and you have to go through all 6 in order to access the room. The first 5 you open. You see those square rooms? There's 6 square rooms. First time you go through each door, you'll be teleported into the corresponding square room. So it's a disorientation trap.
Right.
Yeah.
It absolutely destroys mapping. And you basically have to realize you have to sort of open every door to get in there. And when you get in there,
are identical from the player's perspective when they get teleported in?
They are, yes.
Yeah.
But that central room itself is a trap. It's a hemisphere. You're inside a globe. Sorry, you're inside a globe, and you come in sort of halfway up the wall, and it's this big smooth globe, and you've got to fight a high-level vampire warrior who's wearing slippers of spider climbing, so she can run up and down freely.
That always made me. I was always weirded out by that. Cause don't vampires just old school vampires have spider climb ability anyways? Or maybe I'm just thinking about later iterations of them.
I think they do in Second Ed, but I can't remember offhand in First.
Yeah, that could be that I'm remembering Second Ed, or even the Ravenloft reiteration of them for the Ravenloft box set. But yeah, that also could have just been their way of giving her the ability they forgot to give vampires in the monster manual, for all we know.
Very possibly. But she was a hell of a fight. It was a highly entertaining room. I'm just going to respond to Brian's comments here, because we mentioned earlier A3, Assault on the Area of Slave Lords, and I showed that very linear map. I would argue that it's impossible to get lost in that map. Yes, there's loads and loads of twists and turns, but you'll never be lost because there's so many dead ends. You're not properly lost.
Yeah,
there's only really
scoring
one route through.
Wasn't the scoring kind of universal across all the different modules, though, not specific to the modules?
Yeah.
At least in general criteria. So that may not have been one of those ones where getting lost was really an issue, but
I don't know. It just, to me, it was just a bad map. Whereas one I showed from A1 was a much better map. much better. And A4 as well. But no, I rather like this this trap where the whole dungeon is pretty much a trap. In that sense, yes, a lot of fighting involved, but you've got to suss out that big trap in the center to actually achieve your goal.
Yeah, even before you get there, there's a lot of encounters that are just kind of tricky. They're not traps, but there's a lot of encounters that, you know, set you up for some trouble, and they're definitely more than they appear to be. Trying not to do spoilers in case anybody's playing this or wants to play it, but
You
not
know
that
this
you
one,
have
then,
to
do
give
you?
away the end of it. Yeah,
You know,
this is one of the few modules I ever bought, and then I've actually reacquired over the years because most of my stuff from when I was a kid is no longer with me. But and mainly because it was just a great module. Not to mention it had all that extra stuff, which meant a lot at the time it came out. And it has a wilderness crawl too. It's a wilderness crawl that then leads to a dungeon. Yeah, there's a lot going on in it. It's just it's a pretty quality module.
And I'm going to bring up another map that I like. I know you can see on my screen what I'm doing, so you'll know which one it is. But this particular section,
well, it's designed to be a temple, so it's not a maze for adventurers or to stymie people. It's simply a temple. So the logic is there.
Now, with this particular one, and I don't know how much either of you know about this one.
I've never played it. No,
I own it, but I don't read the modules until I'm ready to run them. Right, so I haven't read this one.
Basically, there is a walkway, a high walkway that leads up to that entrance in the upper temple. Okay, and that upper temple room is heavily guarded, and they will then let off a warning. They'll sound an alert, and monsters will start flooding up those two staircases. And most of the monsters sort of live in barracks and areas sort of in that lower temple area. There is another map beneath this one as well, but this is the bit I most like about this adventure, is this particular section, because what actually happens, you may spend possibly even 2 sessions dealing with the repercussions of crossing that walkway and daring to enter that upper temple section, because there's so much that's going to be making its way up those stairs. My group dealt with it with a wall of fire and pyrotechnics spell to buy themselves some time. Otherwise, they'd have been completely overwhelmed. But they used pyrotechnics to fill the area with smoke, and then gust of wind to blow the smoke down the stairs and try and choke out the lower area. Because otherwise they'd have been just overrun, completely overrun. But I think that's an example of a good design where the monsters are defending a very defensible location.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, when they actually get down to that lower temple, most of the monsters have now gone. So most of them will have, well, a number will have fled back down there, but a lot of them will have been slaughtered in the upper temple section. But the whole adventure, the adventure is very fluid. It's quite a difficult one to run well, because it is so fluid. You need to be so aware of what is where and how long it's going to take to get where it needs to be and where it's going to run to and hide. It needed a bit better organization, but it's a great adventure. Really, really good adventure. It also has it's designed to be played alongside S4 Sojkamp, and also has a wilderness section, but the wilderness section is pretty terrible. That's an awful map. You can't read it. But the lower dungeon area,
definitely not a map to do in the monochrome days.
But the that's the dungeon level, which is half decent. It's a bit random in places. but you get this aerial view of the temple to give you an idea of the overall layout, and this section looks very small. The under temple and the black cyst, but that is just such the Lovecraftian influence on that bit is blatant, really obvious. That's where Tharizdun rests, or at least it's hinted at. Very, very nasty. Very, very nasty. Very good
Levels
adventure.
5 to 10, you say?
No. Levels 5, 6, and 7 need not apply.
That's usually the case. When they give you a level range, that's
Like
that's
level
assuming
5 if
maxed
you happen
out.
to have 12 players. Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be a slaughterfest. It's meant to be played alongside S4, but it's really sort of a sequel. So imagine a party that's capable of completing Sojkanth. They're not going to be level 5 when they come out of Sojkanth. If they survive that, they're going to be 8, 9, or 10.
Well, especially if they fought a vampire.
Minus the level drains,
I was going to say, they might be lower because they're,
Yeah. But the things they're going to fight in, it's not so much what they fight, it's just the things that can happen to them in that cyst if they get greedy. It appeals to my sense of evilness.
Evil, you say?
Evil, and
White Plume.
White Plume Mountain. We have, of course. Oh, come on. Oh, I've got an acrobat error. Oh, my acrobat error hasn't given me the other part of the map. Oh well. No good. I was going to just show an example of a map that made no sense whatsoever, but didn't matter.
I think Squirrel is lagging. He's just answering the spider climb question.
Oh, we could just be practicing on the beer for the drinking quest.
Yeah, maybe.
But that first edition vampire did have spider climb, which made her even more deadly.
Yeah,
she was a 12th level fighter as well as a vampire.
Well, and the funny thing is that's the adventure that also has those two really powerful, unique monsters to it, though, the Zaggy and the Zag-Ya or whatever.
Yeah,
those things are insane in and of themselves, and then they're going to chuck a vampire with class levels at you.
Yeah. All right, I'm looking it up now because now I'm curious. Okay, so first ed vampire. I'm almost there. VWW. There we are. Vampire. Oh, that's a big wall of text.
Oh yeah.
Just closing things down so things pop up on. To get rid of my sharing. There we go.
Yeah, I just skimmed it. Doesn't say anything about spider climb.
No. People arriving just as we're in the process of the random chatter towards the end of the stream. Always happens.
Oh, Squirrel is caught up with us. I need not practice or prepare for the booze.
White Plume is indeed a good one.
Yeah, it's fun house.
The dungeons. I mean, the maps themselves don't have combats. But it's certainly in the case of Forgotten Temple of Tharizdun. What was good about that is the way it made use of the shape of the dungeon and the entrances. It gave an opportunity for the players to manipulate the flow of monsters into the battle. but there were a number of traps set up in that entrance area as well, barricades and net traps and stuff. So you could have party members who were tangled up in nets, being pummeled by hordes of Norkas.
I'm gonna have to step out, guys. I'll be.
All right.
Have a good night.
All right,
Cheers.
catch you soon. And then there were two.
And then there were two. And then there were two. So what do you want to ramble on about for the last sort of 15, 16 minutes as we've covered the topic?
I don't know. We'll just randomly come up with something as we go, something that inspires. We were talking dungeons. I'm just trying to think. What's your favorite dungeon that you've created? My
favorite dungeon that I've created. I rather like, even though I've not typed it all up yet, I rather like my first level of that Dungeon 23 thing I tried. Because I forced myself to break out a little bit of my dungeon having to make a lot of sense mindset. So there's a couple of sections in there that really don't make a lot of sense. But I think they'll provide interesting puzzles and interesting traps. I think I could do, if I was ever going to sort of take it a step further, I could probably do with tweaking the overall layout, because I had to sort of compromise a little bit in order to fit the whole room a day approach. But yeah, I think I'd enjoy playing it, and that's important. What about you?
Mine, I think, would be the one that's most memorable to me would be my creation of Mistamir. Well, I call it Mistamir because that's what they canonically called it. But remember the Beckme starter dungeon? They gave you the first level where Bargle's hiding, and then they give you a map of level 2, and then you have to fill it, and then you're up to creating level 3 for yourself. I had created one that I was very proud of. I've since lost it. I've been trying to recreate it, but it played so well. It's like, and I remember players talking about it because I had the right mix of challenge and treasure quite by accident because I was quite young, but it still sticks out. It's like, how can I recreate that? Damn it.
And often the best things do happen by accident.
Mm-hmm.
And we mentioned earlier, I mean, how often does a good random encounter roll create an ongoing plot hook that the party bite into?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what's great about something like that is the surprise it gives you as the DM. I like being surprised at the table. I like seeing where things go based on the dice and the character's choices. And a nice random encounter that grows into something big that you don't plan for. Magnificent. Chef's kiss.
I'm just looking through some of my dungeons I've drawn to see if my own labeling process is not particularly great, so it might take me a little while to find.
K5K says here, it's how the components of a dungeon are put together that makes it truly special. I don't disagree. It's you can have all the elements of a great dungeon and it just falls flat for whatever reason, or the right combination of overcoming a trap, fighting the right monster, getting the loot and getting out can lead to a complete banger of an adventure.
Yep.
Right.
Oh, come on. Let me. I keep finding lots of little bits and pieces that I've drawn over the years that I've not labeled. I'm not very good. Oh, is this? They're just examples of my drawing, but I'm not sure people are particularly interested in seeing my drawing. They'd rather see my designs, and some of these are ones I've copied. But I'm just so badly disorganized. Maps. I finally found my maps folder. Right. Let's see if I've got anything good in here. It doesn't appear I have.
I think K5K 5-room dungeons certainly have their place, but I don't want to do a 5-room dungeon for every adventure, as you know, Fifth Ed would seem to encourage the quick adventure that you can complete in a night. I like, you know, a good long excavation where players have to plan out a long-term campaign of excavating a dungeon. Those ones can be great as well. But that's not to say a 5-room dungeon once in a while, or especially as a random drop-in would be fantastic.
Right. I want to see if anyone recognizes this dungeon. I'm just going to have to reshare my screen and hopefully this one will come up. Does anyone recognize that? Anyone in chat recognize that?
That actually looks familiar, but I can't.
It should look familiar. I'm interested to see if anyone works out what it is. That's my drawing, my adaptation of it. I stayed very faithful to the original module map, but I just added a lot of extra detail, as in from the room descriptions. And I used a scan of this. I did this on purpose. I then scanned it and put it into Roll20. No one recognize it?
Nope.
It's level 5 of the pyramid in the Lost City. Does that ring any bells?
Again, I own the module. I haven't read it yet.
You haven't read it.
I don't read them until I'm ready to run them.
Right. Right. That is level. That it took me about 6 or 7 hours to draw that out, for the purpose of scanning it in, because obviously the maps when you're playing in Roll20, the pre-prepared maps have got all the trapdoors and secret doors and traps shown. So I drew out my own version of it with all the room furniture and paraphernalia, just to make it feel a bit more realistic, a bit more lifelike. And it worked. It was just a hell of a job to draw it all out. Big fights happened in the eastern portion. That's where they fought all the cultists. But I did that for every single level of the Lost City, including all the expert levels and all the added levels that the Goodman Games version of the Lost City put out.
Right.
And it was a massive undertaking. So
I hope your players appreciated it.
I think they did. We played that during lockdown, so I wasn't at work as much. I had time in the afternoons. I was still in work every day, but we were playing that online during lockdown. It fitted the job. I mean, those who know the adventure would probably recognize the higher tiers more easily. For example, I'm just loading up pyramid level 2 now. Has it not come in yet? No, it hasn't come in yet. Okay. There's pyramid level 2. The Goodman Games version is very good, Kabuki Kid. It's even though it doesn't really work properly with 5th edition rules, what they actually created for the City of the Bottom was great, and would easily convert to basic or expert D&D. Most of it was great. Not all of it, most of it. Pyramid level 2, there we go. Yeah, that's the map I did for the level 2 of the pyramid.
So you hand drew this?
Yes,
Yeah. Okay.
that's my handiwork. The levels that we go to for our players.
Yeah, not me. I'm lazy, and my artistry sucks.
My artistry is not great. I just copied Dice and Logos methods. I will freely admit, I learnt from his website how to do the basics, and just drew them all out. And I didn't want the lines to be straight. I wanted it to feel as if it had been hewn from rock. So that helped. I didn't have to worry about my inability to draw straight lines. Is where a sofa or a bookcase? Which bit? There's a lot of beds.
I think in the center there.
There's a
That looks
fireplace in this.
It's a
It's a
fireplace.
fireplace. I think. Yeah, that's how I draw fireplaces.
Like Chesterfields.
Yeah, I've copied Dyson Logos for this. I learned his techniques, and I watched a YouTube tutorial on how to use different widths of pen to try and highlight certain areas. And I think there's 4 different pen widths used in this, just to make things stand out. I've used 0.05, 0.1, 0.3 and 0.5 pens.
You see, you've already
It's
gotten more detailed than I would ever even conceive of. The pen size.
I mean, the start. What I basically did is I sketched everything out loosely with pencil first, and then go over all the outlines with a 1. Then I rub the pencil out. Then I go over all the outer outlines with the room outlines with a 3, and then I go around over the outer outlines with a 5, and then I do the detail with a 0.5.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just to give different, just to give the.
Well, I mean, it looks good, and if you were to publish a module using that style, would give it that would evoke that old style feel. So there's definitely worthy skill to have. You can do your own art, and
Yeah, I make too many mistakes, and because I'm hand drawing it, it's easy to make mistakes, easy to slip, and I get frustrated with myself. I mean, if you looked at that map of level 5, had a blob of vape juice in the corner.
that just adds to the charm. Turn that blob of
Yeah.
vape juice into a black pudding for the dungeon.
Yeah, true. And map of the city itself. There we go. Let's get the city itself up. Let's present this required a little bit more adaptation and there's not as much detail, but that's it. That's the Lost City. You can actually see bits of my rubbed out pencil marks in the top left hand corner.
There we go. L. Spill coffee on it. It's an aged map now. I agree.
It is indeed. It is indeed.
I like to soak maps into the coffee and tea to give to the players.
Yeah. But that is the titular Lost City. Various buildings in the bottom part. See the volcano at the top. Various water courses feeding the central pool. Island of the Dead in the middle. That twisty bit in the left hand side is a river running through a mushroom park area. So yeah, that is the Lost City. I just thought I copied these. I didn't create them. So I'm better at. I'm sadly better at copying than creating from from scratch. But yeah, if people like them, you're more than welcome to use them. If anyone ever wants to run the Lost City, you can have these maps.
I did eventually plan on seeding it into my OSE game, but again, it all depends on where the players want to go.
Well, you can have my maps if you want them.
I told one of the players about, and he's a big King Kong fan. I told him about Isle of Dread. And he's like, "Oh, I want to convince the players to go there. I want to go there."
Yes, Isle of Dread. And we'll close this with the entrance to the Lost City. I haven't worked out how to flick the screen I'm sharing yet. So if someone can teach me how to flick the screen to present different bits, different slides, because I'm having to open different windows for each one.
I should get StreamYards and start playing with it so I know how to use it.
There we go. That's the room where most people start.
No, I see.
Those are the three cylinders in the middle. The door bottom left propped open in the secret door, propped open by the body of a hobgoblin, which is the first encounter you have. At the end of the passage, there's the crossbow trap, which has already been set off. But that's where you start the Lost City.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll have to review it. If I'm going to run it, I have to review it. It's one of those ones that it's like, yeah, that should really be on my my resume as having run.
Definitely.
Never got to it.
Yeah,
I think I've run most of the big series.
And I think from what I've seen from your videos and from the way your players seem to react to the role-playing aspect, I think they'd love it because it's filled with batshit insane cultists that you could really play up.
Well, they're starting to figure out that you shouldn't just fight everything. It's a lesson they're still learning, but it's getting there. Some of them are leveled now. We got a level 3 and a level 2. So we'll see. There's a rotation. Our player Marcel, who was the infamous Legolas, is coming back in a couple of weeks, and a couple of other players have kind of faded into the background as sort of casuals. So I'm trying to replace them with more regulars. We have a new regular joined. So
cool. One thing about the Lost City, if you do play it sort of as is, they should start at level 1. But you have to sort of let them gain levels as they go down the pyramid.
Right. Well, I don't, in my OSE, I don't require training. I just,
right.
we level between sessions, but I don't do it on the fly at the table. But I don't require them to seek training, not like I do in AD&D.
Because then they're not going to get through level 4 or 5 of the pyramid at level 1. No chance.
I actually don't mind players being elevated above the recommended level for a module, because usually it just means they can last a little bit longer, but it doesn't guarantee success.
The top 5 levels of the pyramid are designed as level 1 to 3.
Right.
It states level 1 to 3 characters, and I would say levels 1 and 2 of the pyramid are fine for level 1 characters, but you need to have some party members that are level 2 really to go any deeper than that. It gets quite hard.
You need those hit points.
Yeah, yes, and you probably need clerics to be able to heal, and you need to be able to deal with big groups of shadows, for example, in one room, which a first level party is not going to do.
No, that'll waste them pretty well.
And the sheer numbers of enemy cultists on level 5, it would batter a first level party. But I think we've managed to drag this stream out until the usual 12 o'clock finishing time, despite both Sacrius and Elfbait having to drop on us early. So thank you, Sean, for staying with me.
Oh, anytime. I'm going to go get dinner now myself anyway. So
people will have joined who weren't here at the start of the stream. I'm going to mention to people who are still in chat at the moment. a week on Friday. Most of you know I do a fighting fantasy read through on Friday. We're not going to be playing that a week on Friday. Sean's going to be running a drinking quest game, and we are looking for volunteers. So if anyone wants to play Drinking Quest live on YouTube with Sean, aka Major's Musings, running the game, with me playing it, you need to be free for 2.5 hours on the Friday, starting 9:30 UK time, which is 5 or 6 hours different to most of the USA, maybe 7 or 8 hours to the West Coast. You need to be willing to have your camera on, make a fool of yourself, and have a few beers on stream.
Beers are a drink of choice. Yeah,
a drink of choice. It doesn't have to be beer. No, I mean, Saxius is thinking of playing it with rum, which might be dangerous.
It's more fun if it's something you can chug, like a beer or a sparkling cider or whatever. But what I got to do is find a chugging chant so that everybody can chant while the person has to chug.
It's going to be Friday the 3rd of March. That one is. So it's not this Friday. It's next Friday, because it's that's sort of the week that is the 2-year anniversary of the stream. So 2-year anniversary of the channel. Sorry. So a week on Friday, and any prospective players, we're going to organise a little meetup beforehand so Sean can talk us through the way the game is played, so it runs a little bit more smoothly, so we don't waste ages on stream figuring it out. Yeah. But if anybody wants to get inebriated with us a week on Friday, you're more than welcome. We're looking for 4 people. We possibly have
if Squirrel has said he's possible, Saksha said he's possible. Daniel's now saying he's possible. If he can figure out, he will.
Yeah, well, we could have our 4 then. We could have our 4. So we shall see. But we want to meet up and talk about it beforehand. So we're going to try and organize something. We'll be organizing it in Discord, in the Discord channel. So if you're not already a member, do please join and just mention send me a message, and we'll get something sorted out. But tonight we did break the 30 live viewers mark at one point. We currently have 24 in. We dropped to 20 at one point. We're back up to 24. So it's been a good stream. We got through the main topic a little more quickly than usual. We were quite focused early on, and we rambled a bit towards the end,
as we do.
Of course we do. But today, it was yesterday, I uploaded my 200th video. It's the 2-year anniversary of my channel next week. I want to thank everybody who's been involved. It's been a great couple of years. Here's to another good couple of years. Thank you to Saxius, to Elfbait, and of course to Major's Musings for being involved in tonight's conversation. And thank you everybody in chat for your contributions. I do hope you've enjoyed the stream. I'm sorry I didn't get too many people's comments up during the stream. I need to get better at doing that. But thank you, Sean, for staying to the end.
Yeah.
And I'll see you all Friday.
Good night, everyone.
Night all.